Guess I'm just trying to figure out at this point, before we get started tonight, if we can make it through one college football show, regardless of the team, regardless of the topics involved. If we can make it through one college football show with no discussion, no debate in the live chat about Ohio State and Michigan. I'm guessing no. I would bet $1 million on it right now if I had it. I'm close. I'm really close, but if I had it. All right. Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. We decided to fire things up on a Wednesday night for the call-in show. Please leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We would certainly appreciate your support in a number of ways. Before you get settled, just hit the like button. If you have not run across our live streams in the past or any content here at the Voice of College Football or very little content and you're not convinced, don't hit the like button. Don't subscribe. Don't do any of those things, but give us a shot and lock in here on best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football that you will find anywhere, not based on me necessarily, but based on the participation, the engagement from all of you, of course. All right, let's get down to it. We want to remind everyone that we do run college football discussion here all the time, but we also need your support and are looking forward to your support. So we've got an Amazon link there in the description section of the videos. Please check it out. Basically, the deal is if you use the Amazon link that we provide, we get a small kickback from Amazon. And you won't send your hard-earned money solely to Amazon to add on their $1.8 trillion worth of wealth. You will send us 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever the case might be, depending on the item. And again, you can feel much better about your purchase to the conglomerate. All right. We've got a Discord link that we provide everyone when you join Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, sign up there. The Knuckleheads talk college football there 24/7, 365. But we also have additional content, exclusive content. The most recent example being a Clemson-Ohio State watch party. No, Clemson and Ohio State did not play in the middle of May. They did not play some kind of hidden game on some back sandlot somewhere that only we knew about. No, we watched the 2019 controversial, very dramatic college football playoff game between Ohio State and Clemson. We will do more of the same. I believe the next three that we've got lined up, we will check out the Ohio State-Miami Fiesta Bowl game for the national championship from 2002-03. Then we've got, of course, a Michigan-Nebraska debate to be had from 1997. We also have the call, the spot from the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game in Columbus. So for some of those conversations, of course, we will sit down and watch the ball game like we did last week with Ohio State and Clemson. It was a good time had by all. So you can join in on the fun by signing up on patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, or right here on YouTube. Either one. You do not have to decide, do I sign up for Patreon? Do I sign up for YouTube? Why does Mark make it so difficult? Why do I have to sign up for both? You do not have to sign up for both. You get the same benefits based on the description of that particular tier. YouTube membership, Patreon, either one. And you can join us for our next great debate. It's barely hanging on to the month of May, and May was great debate month with 4 big debates here at the Voice of College Football, but we will continue the great debates on into the summer. So please, never fear. I labeled the title of this particular live stream, the TV schedule. Much of those games were just released today, so we'll check those out. We also have quarterback battles across the nation. We hope that a number of contributors will be stopping by, a number of media types, to talk about quarterback battles. In particular, Gary Harris stopping by from WVUA in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where he has the Gary Harris Show on Tide 100.9 to talk the Alabama quarterback battle that is threefold of Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, and, of course, Tyler Buckner. I had a pretty low rating for the Alabama quarterback situation as released in my quarterback rankings for the SEC, and cannot think of a time in which I had less confidence in Alabama's quarterbacks, but I have great confidence in the guy that is their head coach. So between the head coaching, the offensive coordinator situation there with one Tommy Rees, that's an unfolding, developing situation as well. Tommy Rees never fielded a prolific offense at Notre Dame. Did he have the type talent at Notre Dame, especially on the outside, that they possess and benefit from at Alabama? No. But Tommy Rees, most likely starting quarterback. Tyler Buckner, maybe Jalen Milroe. A lot of question marks there in Tuscaloosa. Reminds me of the situation in Columbus with Ohio State. Ultra talented rosters, but question marks in key places. So again, Gary Harris from WVUA is going to join us to talk Alabama football a little bit later. And we invite all of you to join us. Let me drop the link in the chat. I should have done that sooner. I know. We'll get this out to everyone, and you can join us. Some of our most recent content involves, again, we are challenging the championships here at the Voice of College Football. We are going to revise national championship counts. This is necessary. Yes, it is necessary because we've got national championships that have been awarded and handed out that are not earned. And we've got other teams that have earned at least a share of a national championship at times. So we are going year by year by year. As I stated, in no such way would I ever take away a national championship from a team during the playoff era, because although I do not like the system, I do not like the subjectivity of the system with a 13-member board selecting the 4 playoff teams, nor do I believe that there were times, certainly, in which there were teams left out of the playoff who had just as good a resume as teams that were invited to the playoff. It is an invitational that, by virtue of being a team with a resume worthy of a college football playoff berth, even if I didn't agree with your selection, you were certainly one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the nation, and then winning the national championship against 2 of the top teams in the country. I am not in any way going to take away from the national championships earned during the playoff era, but we are going through the playoff era to recognize those situations in which, whether that's TCU and Baylor in 2014, whether that is Penn State in 2016, whether that be UCF in 2017 or 18, whether that be Ohio State in 2018, whether that be Cincinnati or Texas A&M or Oklahoma in 2020, that there are teams that had resumes that challenged the teams that were selected. And I just thrive in that environment. I just love taking apart situations like that and going through, again, college football history. And we will do so. We will continue. So check out the video that we posted the other day. We looked at the playoff seasons of 2018, 19, 20, and 21, 22. We will go back through the first few years of the playoffs, and then we will probably go individually through each season of the BCS as much as time allows and the support is there, and the interest in those particular videos, which people seem to love or they seem to ignore. We've got a small faction of people that enjoy college football history. Another series I would love to do, if there was enough time, if I could clone myself about 12 times, that would help, where we would go through each season and we would determine what would the +1 look like. Go through and strip away either the BCS championship game or the playoff, or back in the old days, back in the old days, we'd let it play out in regards to the bowl games that were played, but then add the +1 pre-1998, add the +1 during the 1998 to 2013 era. We would have added the +1, which was basically in some of those years of BCS championship games starting in 2006. It kind of was a +1. And there are years in which the +1 would have basically gotten the job done, meaning that there was a clear distinction after the bowl games to say, these are the two best teams. And these basically have proved out to be the two best teams in the regular season. And with their bowl appearance and performance, boom, they should play for a championship. I think that's pretty rare. And now we're in the playoff era. And again, stripping away the playoff and looking at who should play a +1. I think it's a fun. Sometimes we have tackled this not by me doing actually a video, but by just building graphics and us going year by year live with all of you. So maybe we'll do that as well. Again, the three debates that are coming up that we're going to tackle here in roughly the next month would be 1997 Michigan, Nebraska, 2002 Ohio State, Miami national championship game at the Fiesta Bowl, and 2016 the spot in Columbus, Ohio State and Michigan. Again, sign up on Patreon or right here on YouTube, get your membership, and we will debate college football like nobody else. All right, let's go through the schedule. Many of these TV games were announced just today. Meanwhile, the link to call the show is in the chat. And as soon as I say that, we've got a call coming in. Well, let's go to week 0 real quick and knock this out. Here we go. Think about this. Tomorrow is June. I believe tomorrow is June. I lose track of the dates. I believe tomorrow is June. Yeah, tomorrow is June 1st. So June, August doesn't seem so far away. At the end of August, that last Saturday, we've got college football. And to have a week 0 schedule that includes Notre Dame and USC is strange. It's odd. It's rare. Typically, that's full of a lot of Colorado State and Hawaii and those type of schools playing in that first week. Shoot, Hawaii plays more regular season games than anyone. I love Hawaii's schedule because it is so funny to me that they play further away than everybody else. But for some reason, they love playing football because they schedule more games than anybody. Go through the year. Sometimes Hawaii has played 15 games. It looks like a college football playoff team. In regards of, they don't look like a college football playoff team, but their record in terms of the number of games that they played do. So callers will get to you in 2 seconds. Just want to run down the week 0, Saturday, the 26th of August, with a number of games that have yet to be announced in regards to the TV. Now, if I could watch any of these games, I'm going to watch Notre Dame and Navy by far. Notre Dame and Navy. Of course, USC and Caleb Williams, and watching him play one half of football against San Jose State would be interesting and would kind of break you into it. I love this. I am watching this game, whether I will maybe have activities and plans that particular day and watch it on my DVR or such, or whether I watch it live, just because there will not be any other time the entire season that I will have not that I won't have any desire. I will sit through any college football game, but who in the world's watching UMass or New Mexico State during the regular season? Nobody. But here we are. It's a prime time game on ESPN at 7 o'clock Eastern time, UMass and New Mexico State. That's where those kind of schools have to take advantage of the TV contract and say, hey, yes, we'll play in week 0 in prime time, because otherwise most of the people watching that game, almost everyone watching that game, will not watch either one of those teams the rest of the season. And then we will have staggered by a half hour Hawaii and Vanderbilt. We know what happened to the mighty Rainbow Warriors last season when Vandy went out there and beat them. I believe the final score was 56-10 comes to mind. Vandy this time at home. Do not have to travel all the way to Hawaii, but of course Hawaii does. And then really quick here on that opening Thursday night, Nebraska, Minnesota, you got to think that's going to be a Fox game. I don't think there's any question about that. that will be the Fox game, even though it has yet to be announced. UCF hosting Kent State. That's a sneaky, I don't want to call it a good game. And so is NC State and UConn. Sneaky. Maybe that's a CBS Sportsnet game. Later that night, of course, the marquee game is Utah and Florida on ESPN on that Thursday night. Utah, Florida playing at 8 p.m. Eastern time on that Thursday night. Friday, we've got this seems to be a Michigan State thing. Michigan State always plays one of the directional Michigan schools on a Friday. They've done it many times over the last decade, and expect that to be an FS1 type of game, but it has yet to be announced. Miami of Ohio. So Florida versus Ohio. The two Miamis get together on the ACC network. Louisville, Georgia Tech. So in terms of conference play, right in on it, with the Cardinals and the Yellow Jackets, of course, Jeff Brom is going to make his debut with Louisville. And Brent Key, after doing a nice job with Georgia Tech last season. And we will get to the Saturday schedule in just a second, but we've got calls coming in, so let's get to it. Our buddy Chris is on the line. Chris, how you doing tonight? Hello, Chris. Hello, Chris. Can you hear me? Chris, you may have to jump out of the call. Give it another shot. We cannot hear you. One more time, Chris. Hello? All right. Back to week 1 on Saturday. Sam Houston is making its debut in FBS, both Jacksonville State and Sam Houston this year as new entries to the FBS, and Sam Houston gets it going with a date at BYU. Fresno State at Purdue. That, for me, is an intriguing game. Purdue probably cycles down this year without Jeff Brom. I have early indications that Ryan Walters is going to be a good head coach, but he's probably got his hands full in year 1. They do have Hudson Card at quarterback, and they lose a ton of weapons on offense, in particular Charlie Jones and Payne Durham. But Purdue plays, listen to this non-conference schedule for Purdue. Not that they play any heavyweights, but they have no gimmies. No gimmies for the Boilers. They boiler up with Fresno State, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech. That's pretty solid, huh? We complain about these teams not playing anyone, and Purdue just said, hey, I understand we've not scheduled Alabama and Georgia here, but we're playing Fresno State, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech. And, of course, Fresno State had a tremendous season after a sluggish start to begin last year under Jeff Tedford. So that upset alert right there, and probably won't be much of an upset because I can't imagine that Fresno State's going to be much of an underdog in that game. We'll give it another shot here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Chris? Hello? All right. So back to the schedule. Northwestern Rutgers, the Big Ten making a good move here. Thinking, okay, neither one of these teams is going to be any good. They're going to be horrible, awful. Nobody's going to want to watch this game. But at least when they're 0-0, there can be at least some hype, at least a little bit of they can be talked up as possible contenders. Who knows what could possibly happen? Look out, Wisconsin. New head coach, although I'm a big believer in Luke Fickle. I believe his name's Fickle. Luke Fickle as one of the best, as the best hire. I named him the best hire of the head coaches during the offseason. So Luke Fickle and Wisconsin. However, first-time quarterback, first-time offensive coordinator, first-time head coach at that school, working together. One of those possible early season issues against a Buffalo team that's been capable in recent years. Yes. Anything else jump out? USC takes on an awful Nevada team. coming off a horrendous season, Notre Dame against Tennessee State. So Notre Dame has dipped into the FCS pool here recently. That is not like them. Notre Dame hosting Tennessee State. You wonder how that one comes to be. Who makes that phone call? Who made that phone call? Notre Dame. Or they had already filled out the entire schedule and they had a slot open and they went through everybody conceivable and thought, okay, there's nobody available. We've got to go to the FCS level, find somebody. We got to play somebody. Texas San Antonio at Houston, Jeff Traylor and company. Jeff Traylor's won 30 of 40 games with the Roadrunners, and that with Houston entering the Big 12. And although that's not a Big 12 game, Houston with a higher profile now that they're in a Power 5 conference, better look out for Texas San Antonio. Texas Tech. A lot of people like Texas Tech this year, and the Red Raiders and of course, one Joey McGuire coming off an 8-5 season. Look at who just showed up here. We got Ty Hudson on the line. Ty, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on?
Time for a little Tusk Talk with Ty. Folks, if you're unaware, right here on YouTube, Tusk Talk with Ty, breaking down the Hogs all the time. Good stuff. Ty, what's going on tonight?
Cream of the crap. Doing my Macho Man Randy Savage impression there the best I can. Mark, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I am good.
It's good.
I'm enjoying the summer, even though it's not officially summer to me. Hey, I look at the temperature more so than the calendar, and it's been summer around here for a good 6 weeks.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We've had our, it's typical Arkansas weather. It was really humid today. Didn't really wasn't digging that at all.
No.
The humidity can stay away. I live right next to Beaver Lake. For anyone who comes across this and they're familiar with Northwest Arkansas, Beaver Lake is huge. And it's really super humid. I'm only like a mile down the road, and like the humidity factor is just doubled here. But anyways, enough about the weather. Enough about the humidity in my world down here in the swamp.
We were checking out the week 1 schedule.
I saw that. Yeah.
And where are the Hogs? Who do they have week 1?
Well, September 2nd, and they just, obviously like they have in a lot of places, they just released some times. They've got Western Carolina on SEC Plus, ESPN Plus. It's Western Carolina. It's in Little Rock. 3 p.m.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah. I get it. It's Western Carolina. I just I want to apologize to anybody who does happen to come across that game and you have a look at War Memorial Stadium. I'm not going to lie to you. It's an embarrassment. I know there's people in Little Rock. Oh, I make them so mad when I say that, but it's just, I'm sorry. It's not up to snuff. It's quite the outdated stadium.
Well, the thing is what we could accept 25 years ago. And to me, 25 years ago, it doesn't seem that long. It's still modern age, 90s, but
right.
There's just been so many facilities built since then or upgraded significantly that you just can't, if you're playing SEC football and you've got that kind of program, you can't be playing with just that kind of facility. You wouldn't think.
They, it's clear they're trying to get out of there because it used to be a 2 times a year thing, and then it was 1, and now it's 1 every other year, and now they're like, well, on the year that we don't play there, we're gonna have a scrimmage down there, which is so silly. It's, I think, what's going on, board of trustees, all the money. Well, I should say all the money. Northwest Arkansas, as we all know, JB Hunt, Walmart, Tyson Chicken, all that up here. The money up here is crazy. But board of trustees and the money is down in Little Rock. I think that's just part of it. You're going to have to play games down where the BOT is. If I'm not mistaken, they're all down there in Little Rock or in those surrounding areas. So, but yeah, they need to be out. They should have been out, like you said, 20, 25 years ago. They probably should have been out at least 10, 15 years ago. And I know, again, someone's going to get mad. Someone is going to come across this. Well, there goes Ty. He's crapping on Little Rock again. But it's just, and you sometimes, depending on where you park, you kind of risk your life going to the damn game. I'm just saying. I'm just calling it like I see it, Mark.
I just want to make sure we don't get kicked off the air here. So I'm done. If you see me disappear for a second, I just plugged us in. So we should be all set. Although the charger light's not coming on, so I may have to check on that. But anyway,
I thought you meant like we were going to get kicked off the air
because of your mouth.
Because of my mouth.
I think we're safe. you know where that line is. So
yeah.
You're an old vet, so you know where to draw the line there.
I'm an old timer.
I went at Greg Sankey's comments from the other day. So the SEC is in Destin, Florida, as they typically are this time of year, sorting out the issues of the league. And they're a little bit more highly promoted and recognized this season because Texas, Oklahoma come in, and there is a schedule format to be determined. Okay. The 3-6-6 model with the 3 protected opponents, 3 rivals per se, that is what was most talked about during this entire time since Oklahoma and Texas joined. Now we're hearing that there could only be 1 protected opponent, and the league may stay with 8 games and go with a 1-7-7 lineup, which, folks, I had a few people ask me what that meant. Well, it means that there's only 1 team that each school plays every season, and then the other 14 teams in the league are divided into groups of 7, and they alternate playing those 2 groups every other season. I had my thoughts about the way this should play out. I would implement a flex schedule, and what that means is every team has a different number of rivals that should be protected, and then you build a schedule in a similar way around that. It's a little more clunky because it's not just standard, 1-7-7. For some teams, it's 2-7-6, but it can still be accomplished. So where do you stand on all that?
It's silly. I think a lot of it's just silly, Mark. I don't know. I think it was Sam that said it today. I think Sam said today and I might be reading this out of context, that at first he's basically come to the conclusion that it's just kind of, it is what it is. And that could have been him talking about adding that 9th game too, because I know he said at first he didn't care, and then he thought, well, that's how did he put it? 9 losses to the SEC. I don't know. It's the schedule stuff it's starting to fly over my head at this point, because it's like, are they going to do the pods or not? It doesn't sound like it.
No, I don't think.
It doesn't sound like it. I mean, we're not going to split the SEC East and the West. I mean, I'm just so confused with what they're trying to do. I feel like now's as good a time as any to get out ahead of it and just say what it is you're going to do.
Well, I think there's a lot of infighting because there are different priorities. Missouri looks at their program differently than Georgia looks at their program. So they have different priorities, and the league has different priorities. So this is what I think it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I'll zero in on your Hogs first because I want to get your reaction. If they go to this just 1 protected opponent, if you slice and dice this conference, do you know what you're going to get hit with? I'm almost going to guarantee it. And you don't want to hear this. And I thought of you when I posted this video yesterday, and when I ran down what I projected the 1 opponent to be for everyone, but it's going to be your buddies up there to the north, the mighty Mizzou Tigers.
Well, it was fun talking to you, Mark.
I'm
I gotta go.
just the messenger.
Probably. No, I think you're right. Because
that's how it comes down. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of Hog fans will be pretty peeved at that.
It's going to be Ole Miss and Mississippi State. It's going to be Texas, Oklahoma. It's going to be LSU and Texas A&M. It's going to be Bama, Auburn, etc. And obviously, it's not going to be anyone else from the East for you guys. So
think about that. So Alabama and Auburn, but no Alabama, Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting robbed of some great rivalries.
Yeah. I don't like it.
It's nonsensical is what it is, Mark. And it's, all we can do is report on it. We could sit here and flap our gums and get as mad, or at least I can, because it's going to affect me with the SEC and Arkansas. But I've said from the get-go, I don't know how adding more teams to the SEC benefits Arkansas. And of course, that's not the goal. The goal is to appease the SEC and open up the wallets or fatten up the wallets a little more of the SEC and get those buyouts north of 55 million, which they will do once, or not buyouts, sorry, the payouts, 55 million once Oklahoma and Texas joins. Who cares about anything else? And yeah, I mean, Texas A&M, are we not going to get that every year? Like, that would be a fun game to watch every year, the home and home series or whatever they decide to do. Maybe they play it in Arlington. Yeah. And you're right. It's probably Mizzou.
Yeah, that's how I see it coming down. If they go with the one protected game, and that it's even under consideration, like you just said, is ridiculous. But we'll see if that comes out. As Sankey said, there's a few things that come into play here. He talked about bowl eligibility. So obviously there are the Missouris of the world fighting for an 8-game season because they don't want to play the extra conference game because they could get knocked out of. So like the last 2 years, Missouri was 6-6. Had they played an extra SEC game, they run a probably 70% risk that they would have lost that game and would not have made bowl play. So
see, I haven't even thought of that. How does that affect?
Well, here's the deal. Here's how I look at it and described it, Ty, is that so the SEC plays the 8 games. If they go to 9, so that 9th game is most likely going to knock out an FCS/easy group of 5 win for everybody in the SEC. So those 16 SEC teams are going to go 16-0 in that game that they're currently playing now, or the one-off loss that's suffered is by Vandy losing to Middle Tennessee, and it doesn't matter anyway because they're not going to a bowl game. So the SEC goes about 15-1 or 16-0 that 1 week of play. Well, if that then becomes a conference game, those 16 teams go 8-8 because they got to play each other. So you are taking 7 to 8 wins out of the conference throughout the conference. So there is a likelihood, I don't know how often, because you'd have to run the numbers and go through each season, that you're going to knock a few teams out of bowl participation. When I say a few, probably 2 or 3 every 5 years would be my guess. Something like that. Maybe close to 1 per season.
Yeah. That's a letdown. I don't know. You're throwing a lot of math at me, but I do think. Well, listen. They're going to go to the 9. They're going to go to 9 games. That's going to happen. And
Ty, think about it this way: your team, Arkansas, last year. Let's say they didn't play BYU.
Yeah.
And they played Oklahoma or Texas instead. Not that they couldn't win that game, but there's about a 50-50 chance that they lose the game. Well, they would have finished 5-7.
Yeah.
And not played in a bowl game.
Yeah. You're out at that point. I don't know. I mean, those would have been good games. I'll be honest with you. I would like to have watched Arkansas play either one of them, but yeah. So it's a possibility, but if they're not doing pods, who knows what those other 2 or that other game is, right? I mean, maybe it's Vanderbilt. But then again, you were talking about Vanderbilt earlier and what they did to Hawaii on the road. I mean, who knows? Vandy's not exactly horrible against Arkansas.
No.
Their record's not horrible against the Hogs. They've actually beaten the Hogs a couple of times in the last 15 years or so.
Ty, are you going to live to see an Arkansas SEC football championship?
Ooh. Did somebody ask that in chat?
No, I just came up with it.
Man. That's a tough question. Hear me out. Okay. My first reaction is no. That's my first reaction. I mean, your audience, a lot of them know me by now. My audience knows me. I'm not gonna blow smoke up your rear end. But there is something to consider. And the two biggest things that have changed the landscape of college football have so far been, I think, a very net positive for the University of Arkansas, and that's the transfer portal and the NIL. Arkansas's got the money in NIL. I would argue that's why they've been able to add former 5 stars out of high school, and then they go on to Oklahoma, Georgia, whatever, and they're transferring to Arkansas. They're one way or another. I'm sure that I don't know this, but I'm sure that's being communicated, even though it's probably not supposed to be. I think that's the rule, right? You can't talk NIL until they've signed or something. But it is attractive, and I think it is somewhat well known that the NIL here is a big deal. The Hunt family is involved. If you're not familiar with the Hunt family, you need to look them up. JB Hunt, they're massive. They're involved. There's some other folks involved. The money is real down here. Believe it or not, we do wear tennis shoes in Arkansas. And there is some wealth in Northwest Arkansas.
You bought them at Walmart, but
yeah. Well, and half the damn population works at Walmart. But those two things have played a major factor. Now, you can argue, listen, they got Drew Sanders out of the portal, Dwight McLaughlin out of the portal, and their defense last year was horrendous. Well, they've made some changes, and I'm not going to go too deep into that unless you want me to, but they've made some changes. Odom's gone. They've got in a new guy. They've got in a new secondary coach who helped orchestrate Florida State's elite secondary a year ago. He's at Arkansas. Money talks here with the NIL, and money talks here with being able to bring in these type of coaches. Those two things are something you have to take into consideration when you're talking about the future of college football and the landscape. We just had TCU in the 4-game playoff. TCU. All right. I've crapped on them so much because they're out of the Big 12, and I get it. Their pathway is so much easier than what Arkansas has to deal with. And we saw what happened when they did face a big bad SEC team. Although that big bad SEC team probably should have lost Ohio State. But anyways, that's another video for another time. I think that those are two things you have to consider. They've done really well in the transfer portal. In fact, their high school recruiting is doing really well. They're looking at a possibility of a top 15 class. Now, it takes years to stack those up to where those actually mean anything. And in this day and age now, it's not just recruiting them out of high school. Now it's about keeping them out of the portal. It's a whole different world. But I think Sam has done a pretty good job so far in that aspect in recruiting and high school, and both high school and transfer portal. But at the end of the day, I just don't know that I see it. They came close. They've been, 3 times, and they've been close.
Yep.
They have. They've, but they just continue to shoot themselves in the foot, whether it's bad coaching hires or taking a couple of years off recruiting the state of Texas or whatever. It feels like at times they've been so close yet so far away, and at the end of the day, they've got to deal with Alabama and LSU and Auburn and Texas A&M, and now they're going to have Texas and Oklahoma. Not every year now. We know that's all going to change as we're talking about, as we're discussing right now. But it doesn't get any easier for them adding those 2 schools. I'm sticking with my original answer. Probably not. No. But never say never.
We love our guy, D-Rock Irish, a Notre Dame fan, but I am going to call out his ridiculous statement here.
Uh-oh.
And every fan has their own motivation and incentive, so there's no right or wrong here. But for me, he says, outside of conference revenue, don't see the allure in playing in a conference. Did you hear D-Rock Irish? What I just asked Ty, we are wondering whether Arkansas can win a championship in the SEC. And you know what? Because it's been forever, because they've gotten there 3 times, but they didn't come through and win. But when is the last time, because Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference, when is the last time Notre Dame has won a championship of any kind? Well, that was in 1988. Arkansas won a conference championship since the last time that Notre Dame won anything. So if you play in a conference, at least you can win a conference championship.
Yeah. So what did he say? I didn't catch what he said.
Oh, he's saying outside of conference revenue, don't see the allure of playing in a conference.
Oh. Of course. Oh, man.
Like if you don't play in a conference and you're not going to win the national championship, are you just playing basically just to play and make money for the school? Is that why you're playing?
Yeah. That's a good question. What is the point?
What is the point?
Yeah, the good Lord. I mean, he kind of throws the revenue share under the bus there. Are you kidding? What's the Big Ten get? 50, 55?
Well, it's going to be 80 something once we start 2024.
Okay, I'm way out of. Okay, I know the SEC's behind them still, right?
Yeah,
60 million.
Yeah, whatever. The Big Ten one is easy. They signed a $7 billion 7-year contract. So the league makes $1 billion every year. Divide that by 14. That doesn't count playoff or bowl revenue for all these schools either. It's just a regular season. And the SEC's like at $800 million for 10 years. I don't know when that comes due, and they'll be able to negotiate that higher.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would imagine that's going to happen. That negotiation will happen after this year because of the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, right? Like, wouldn't that be in the SEC's best interest?
Yeah, that probably coincided. I believe it did. Their entry coincided with the new TV contract. That makes sense.
Okay.
Harry's telling us in the chat that the SEC gets $72 million per team through 26.
Wow. I'm way behind. 72 million.
Yes, those two conferences are in good shape.
So why join a conference, Mark? Why join a conference?
I guess I would just rather than, even if you have a really good team, you go 10-2. Okay, you won 10 games. You get to see your ranking number 9 in the country. Fine and dandy, but what were you playing for?
Yeah.
Ty, anything we need to know about the Hogs?
Oh,
before we let you go.
Well, gosh.
You were touting a potential top 15 class.
Yeah.
And we know that, of course, June is big on official visits.
Mm-hmm.
Any buzz about any particular players that are leaning Arkansas's way?
Well, I don't know about leaning just yet. I know they're trying to flip. I don't know that I see it happening. I know they're trying to flip this 4-star Xavier Atkins. They're trying to flip him. He's going to visit. I don't know the exact day. It's sometime early June. It's like the first week of June. He's an outside linebacker. He's probably more of a safety hybrid because he's like 6'1", 200 pounds, but he has a verbal commit right now to LSU. Brian Huff, this kid at Jonesboro, I am really big on. He's a lean towards Arkansas. He's a 4-star, I think, according to Rivals. He might be on 247 now. 6'3", 225. He's going to visit second week of June, I think, somewhere between the 7th and the 10th, somewhere in there. Yeah, they're in on some pretty big prospects. They're doing pretty well. I don't know that they land a top 15 class. Right now, they're ranked 15th on 247. Charleston Collins, this defensive lineman out of Little Rock, just got a big bump. So did Courtney Crutchfield, the wide receiver, who's out of Pine Bluff. They're getting a little help. 247 giving them some boost. I know there's some rumors, and I was going to wait till Friday to talk about this on my show. But you know what? You guys are here. There are a lot of rumors about a 4-star athlete flipping from Arkansas to Ole Miss. No idea if there's any truth to it. He apparently tweeted a picture of flipping to Ole Miss on Twitter, and then he took it down, and later he said he was joking around, but that's Noreel White, this kid that's going to end up, I think he's offered it on well, I don't want to speak. He's a 4-star athlete right now out of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, 6 foot, 170, 175 pounds. So obviously if you lose him, that's going to be a pretty hard hit. They're going to end up with some commits in June. No idea how many yet. Kid out of Little Rock, who everyone's been big on, Braylon Russell, running back, he was actually the first commit to Arkansas. He's a 4-star, ran a 4.5 40 at 15 years old, and he's a big kind of a bruiser back with a little bit of oomph when he has the ball in his hands. Doesn't look like, a lot of people thought he was going to recommit to Arkansas. At the moment, I'm not liking their odds of flipping him back, because it sounds like well, there's a lot going on there, but they may be in on, well, they're in on some other players. I'll just say that Braylon Russell right now is not at the highest of their priority, but they did get a 4-star or a 3-star running back or athlete who's probably going to end up playing both, or playing on the offense for Arkansas with some pretty good offers from Florida and Georgia. That's Jaden. I think it's Baugh. I don't know, Baugh out of Decatur, Georgia. They're doing a really good job. I mean, they're doing what they need to do, and they're kind of, what I found interesting, I put a video out of the top 4 most impactful players on offense for Arkansas, or out of the portal. All 4 of these guys that I mentioned, if you haven't watched it, go watch it, but all 4 of those guys could have a pretty big impact one way or another. But they're loading up. They're doing really well. And again, the month of June is going to be extraordinary for me, for someone who needs news, who only covers one team. I need news. I need more to talk about. And I know Razorback baseball they're hosting. What else is new? They're hosting, and they're expected to make a run once again to Omaha. So I'll have a little bit to cover there. But throughout the rest of June, all the way up until the end, it looks like there's going to be a lot of high school stuff going on, a lot of high school recruiting, hosting, like I said, somewhere between 15 and 20 players this month, I think. So a lot going on. It's going to be busy.
Ty, the calls are stacking up here, so I'm going to get to them. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man.
Let everyone know where to find you.
Well, just Tuss Talk, just at Tuss Talk on Twitter. You can always follow me on my personal account too, at Ty Hudson. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Mark. As always, it's a blast, sir.
Always a good time, man. Good to see you.
Take it easy.
Have a good week. Our guy Ty Hudson, again, it's a good time with him. Does a great job. Tusk Talk with Ty. And check him out right there. Let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got Porter checking in.
Hey, good evening, Mark.
Hey, Porter. How are you?
Good. I want to talk about SEC scheduling. By the way, good discussion with Arkansas. Before I get to scheduling, I would say probably 06 is probably the closest they came to winning the SEC. They played Florida in the SEC championship game. As a Georgia guy, obviously I wanted them to win. Unfortunately, they had a punt returner have a punt slip through his fingers, and I don't know if you remember that.
But I think they were down by a touchdown. I think they lost what's the score that comes to mind? Like 42-30 or something. It was like a 2 score, but they only they were down by like 5 or 6, and they were going to get the ball back. Yeah. And that pretty much iced the game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example about when you have a special backfield, you got to cash in. Like, West Virginia should have cashed in 07, and Arkansas should have cashed in 06. I mean, that backfield in Arkansas was unbelievable with Peyton Hillis and
Yep.
McFadden and Felix Jones. That was a heck of an offense. I don't remember much about their defense, but well, hey, this is what I would do if I were Sankey right now. And is a little background to kind of frame my discussion. It's kind of funny how I called your show, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. You may not remember it, but I said, Mark, something is not making sense right now. I listen to CNBC every day. I listen to the Financial Network every day. And Disney's laying off players, employees. They're I'm not sure what the Disney stock did, but has been doing. But I do know they've had some financial issues at Disney. But yet my fellow SEC fans continually throughout the whole offseason have talked about how much we're going to get this great TV deal. And then suddenly we come to SEC media days. I'm sorry, SEC spring meetings. And suddenly we don't have a deal or anything to announce as far as ESPN goes, any kind of revised TV deal. Greg Sankey can't announce that we're going to 9 games. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. And it's funny how that happens. I don't understand the hubris of my fellow SEC fans. All, ever since Texas and Oklahoma decided to join the conference, and we thought we were going to rule the world, especially from a TV standpoint. And now suddenly we get here, and we're kind of at a standstill right now.
So I understand your concerns. I think you're outthinking the field generally, but I think some of that optimism is based on just that's been the way of life. So when you constantly have the world up against you, and you get some reasonably good news, and you can see how things could work out for you, well, you're going to be pessimistic. On the flip side, if everything's always worked out your way, and you are in a football sense, I'll borrow from Bill Walton, you are the conference of champions. Well, why is that going to stop?
Well, I'm not worried about that per se. I'm just all this hand wringing about 9 versus 8. Why don't we have an SEC revised TV deal? I really don't care. I think we're going to do just fine. So this is what I would do if I were Sankey, or if I could. I mean, Sankey obviously he serves at the pleasure of all the presidents. So, but if it were up to me, how I would do it, I want to get your opinion on this, is I would, for 24 and 25, when the first 2 years that Oklahoma and Texas are in the conference, is I would stay with the 8 games. I would move Alabama and Auburn over to the east, Missouri to the west. So you have 8 teams on both sides, and continue with the divisional play and stay with the 8 games until we know what ESPN is going to do on this TV deal. What are your thoughts on that?
So what you just drew up is what I drew up as soon as Oklahoma and Texas joined the league. That's how I flipped it out and changed up the sides and drew it up. Now, in terms of, so I obviously agree with that. Now, in terms of the TV deal impacting that divisional setup, what is your thought process there?
Well, my thing is, you got to do it the first 2 years. I would configure it that the first 2 years, because you got to do return games. Like if we play in Austin in 24, if it's a interdivisional game, we got to make the return trip, or Texas has to come to Athens. So you got to have at least a 2-year window, and I would just try that. I would try that scenario out for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So you keep and even intra-divisional games, you give that return trip back to your fellow divisional member. So you got to do at least 2 years because you got to do the return trips. But I would just try it for 2 years and just see how it goes. Meanwhile, you're going to get outstanding TV ratings, and then you go back to ESPN and go, okay, these are our ratings. Obviously, Oklahoma and Texas are doing well in the conference. They're being well received. We need to restructure this deal. That's what I would do. And it also helps you out in that. You and I have gone back and forth on this whole conference championship thing. I care more about the playoff, but I think also what we're going to find out in the SEC is, and I don't know if it's this way as much with the Big 12, but if you don't have a division to win, you kind of lose interest in the conference championship game. I think what's going to happen is if we go to, let's just say we stay at 8 and we just mix it all up, what are we really fighting for? What are we really competing for? If we get to November and it looks like, you have a chance to get in the top 2, but then you also have a chance if you're already slotted for the playoff, what do you really care about making the SEC championship game? So I think
I guess to win the SEC championship, number one, but more importantly, if you've got your mindset, it's to get a bye in the first round.
But if you don't have to go to the SEC championship game, you're getting a bye because you don't have to go to the SEC championship game. You follow me? I know what you're saying.
Yeah, you're playing one less game. You're not getting a bye. I understand your point. You are, in terms of total number of games, but you're getting that bye 2 weeks earlier than everybody else is getting it.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, exactly. So my point with keeping the divisions is you still have that distinct East versus West. You still have that kind of competition in the middle of the season. Where are we in the divisional standings? When you're just trying to get to I guess we would do it to where it's the 2 top. I guess 1 and 2 play for the SEC championship. I guess that's where we're headed. I mean, does that really capture? If you're a 10 and 2 SEC team, let's just say you're Florida, and you've already been on the playoff shows, and it shows you as an 8 or 9 seed in the playoff. I mean, do you really care if you go to the SEC championship game? I don't know. I don't know. To me, if you keep the divisions, you keep that interest in the divisional race and by doing that, you keep the interest in the SEC championship game.
Aren't those semantics, though? What's the difference between winning a division championship to get to the conference championship game and finishing at least number 2 in the conference to get to a conference championship game?
Yeah, but you may not get to the playoff. I mean, LSU this past year, I'm not so sure by LSU going to the playoff. I'm not so sure they would have gotten in a 12-team playoff this past year by having to play Georgia.
Well, no, they would not have been in a playoff this year.
Right.
But if they would have won the conference championship game, they would have been.
Well, yeah. There's no doubt about it.
They could have lost another game and been like 9 and 5 and been in the playoff.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah, you're right. But I guess my point is, by keeping the interest in the divisions, you keep the interest in you in turn keep the interest in the SEC championship game. I'm not so sure this SEC championship is going to be.
I think everything you've said is really smart and makes a lot of sense, except for this final point. I don't get that. Maybe by optics, from an optics standpoint, that for whoever out there that doesn't understand how it works, but the pursuit to get to the SEC championship game is almost exactly the same. And the value of the SEC championship game is exactly the same, regardless of whether you have divisions or not. My biggest issue with this whole situation is the determination of how you select these 2 teams, because the math obviously tells us that the larger the conference, the less number of teams that you're going to be able to play compared to the universe of the conference. So, for example, if you're only playing 8 conference games, your conference is 16, you're missing 7 teams in the conference. Therefore, you're going to have a greater likelihood by far of having a tie for second place or first place, or a 3-way tie for first place, or whatever the case might be. Multiple ties that have to be sorted out to determine who makes the championship game. And if that can be determined by a head-to-head situation, I'm all for it. But most likely, those are going to have to be determined by all sorts of strange common opponents, configurations that don't really distinguish 2 teams.
Well, I to me, I think it's more simple, but you're not going to like what I'm going to say.
Okay. What? Get rid of the conference championship.
What's that?
Get rid of the conference championship game.
Well, not just that. Getting back to the question you just asked. Let's just say we continue with these ridiculous conference championship games, which I don't like. Let's just say we continue with them, and my answer to your question is use the college football playoff committee. Whoever's the highest team. Say you have 2 teams.
Lord.
I knew you're gonna say that, Mark. I mean, I went ahead and prepared myself. But if you have a 10-2 Texas and a 10-2 Georgia, and they didn't play head to head, and they both have the same conference record and everything, I would say whoever's the highest in the college football playoff poll. That's the one.
If I'm a conference commissioner, and even beyond that, if I'm in any position of power for any of these schools or in the conference office, why am I relinquishing my authority to a bunch of clowns in some boardroom somewhere else in the country? They already hold this power over our conference in terms of telling us you're going to get 1 team in, or you're going to get 2 in, or you're going to get 3. And they already hold that over our heads. Why are we relinquishing our authority over how to govern our own conference? Why would you do that? I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Because
you're a red-blooded American. What are we, like, giving up our sovereignty?
No, you're not giving up your sovereignty.
Yes, you are. You're allowing somebody else to decide how you determine to run your conference.
No, you're not, because
you do.
I would rather have the biases out in the national than I would the biases in my own region. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like being in the SEC for 30 plus years like I have. You don't know what it's like having a league office in Birmingham. You don't know what it's like to have terrible officials who have college allegiances to other schools that constantly screw your team on the field. I would rather have somebody in Topeka, Kansas, and somebody from Portland, Oregon make the decision on who goes than I would somebody in my own region.
We don't have people make the decision. We have a structure decide. Well, we come up with a good structure, and it decides.
Well, I mean, if all things are equal, I have no problem using that committee. I think the committee's got. I don't know what your problem is with the committee. The committee's I think they've done a pretty good job.
Oh, I'm not saying that they haven't done a good job. I just don't know why you relinquish your sovereignty as a conference over to some outside committee.
Because
you're basically
you don't know what it's like in the SEC. There's so many biases that exist in Birmingham.
I lived there for 7 years. Well, I covered the conference for 7 years. I went to the news conferences every week. I went to practices, multiple times a week. I lived amongst SEC football fans. I get your point, but I just don't understand anyone who would want to relinquish control of their own entity to other people. You're basically saying, we're not smart enough to figure it out ourselves.
No, I didn't say that. We did that. You probably don't remember this. In 2003, we did that. There was a situation where Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida all had the exact same record, and the team that finished the highest in the BCS poll went to the SEC championship game, and it worked out fine.
Oh, so who says it worked out fine? Based on who? Of course, it worked. when you say it worked out fine, yeah, there was a team that was selected, of course. You could have picked them blindly out of a hat. There would have been a team that would have been selected to go to the SEC championship game. That doesn't mean it made sense.
Well, anyway, I mean, okay. If let's just go back to that original scenario. If you're 10-2 Texas, and you're 10-2 Georgia, and you have to play Alabama or LSU, or whoever, you're gonna wind up fine either way. Either you're gonna get selected for the SEC championship game, or you're gonna sit at home and wait for your playoff.
Yep.
So I mean, you're not really screwing anybody. It's a pretty good position to be in, to be honest with you. So, that's just my opinion. I think these committee members have pretty good integrity. I've not seen much biases. You sure as heck have less biases than you have in our region. Especially when you have an office in Birmingham, there's a lot of backstabbing that goes on in our conference.
Yeah,
so
I agree with all that, but I'm not talking about people selecting it. I'm talking about having a structure in place that determines it.
Yeah. Well, you probably could. I mean, yeah, you could probably come up with something, whether it's common opponents or, how many left-handed players you have. I don't know. Heck, I really don't.
And again, I don't like any of that stuff. But when you have a conference that's 16 schools large, then these are the kind of issues you have.
Well, but Mark, it makes it fun. I think controversies make it fun because, especially when you have a 12-team playoff, because you may get hurt by, or you may get your feelings hurt by something, but when it gets down to it, if you have double-digit wins and you've gone through the SEC, you're going to land in a good spot postseason, and you should. And so anyway, that's just my opinion. I'm surprised that we haven't announced the 9-game schedule, but it makes a lot of sense, especially how this kind of this revised TV deal just has not been announced. So Sankey's really good at what he does. I love the way he worked it with the playoff, where he didn't get his deal with the playoff in Indianapolis, so he said, "Okay, fine, we're just going to pull out. Maybe we'll have our own national championship." And then everybody came back to the table, including the Rose Bowl, and we got a deal. So I would not bet against Sankey, whether it's the TV deal or doing or going to 9 and doing what's best for the conference. But like I said originally, if we stay at 8, I say we just keep the divisions going.
Okay, good stuff. Anything else, Hunter?
That's your Alabama fan. I'm Porter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've done that. I don't know why, but anyway, okay. Hunter, Porter, they're very similar. My apologies. I'm so sorry about that. All right, Porter.
All right, man. See you.
Have a good night. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know why I've done that a few times. We've got a couple super chats coming in. We've got Nick. Nick says Mark is getting a little grumpy. Might be time to get a nice juicy pizza after the show. Nothing can cure frustration like those first free bits of steamy, cheesy deliciousness. Few free bits.
Well, I got some allergen-free chicken pot pie at the house. Would you like some?
I'm okay, but thank you for the offer. So we've got that super chat from Nick. Thank you so much for that. I don't know that I'm really grumpy necessarily. I just disagree with giving up your authority over your conference to 13 people in some room somewhere. LBC Trojan, Michigan 989 all-time wins and counting. None of those wins versus Oklahoma. Okay, they lost to Oklahoma in the 1975 Orange Bowl. I think that's Michigan's only confrontation with the Sooners. They lost to Texas, of course, in the 04 Rose Bowl. They've never played LSU. I don't believe they've ever played Clemson. They lost to Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl in 01. So only 3 games played there. Jackson, what's going on tonight?
Oh, it's going pretty good. How's it going with you, Mark?
I'm good.
Here to talk about the schedule announcements for the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we finally got the Big Ten on CBS games figured out for a little bit. Well, we know the Michigan UNLV game will be on CBS for week 2.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. Ohio State, Indiana will be
Yeah.
on CBS for the
Let's
Saturday.
see.
But here's another good one. We got ourselves a triple header for the day before Labor Day. So we're going to have Northwestern Rutgers at 11 a.m. or noon on CBS. And I believe we're going to have Oregon State, San Jose State, 3:30, 2:30 on CBS.
When did those come down?
It was about a few hours back.
Okay. Because ESPN has, I thought they updated their board here, but they didn't because they don't have TV designations for those games.
Man, they need some editors.
Yeah. Jackson caught my tweet today. I saw where FAU had players from the draft that were coming back to the team. And I'm like, what the heck is this all about? FAU doesn't even have players in the draft. So I click on, this is on the college football front page on ESPN, the fine folks at ESPN doing a nice job with this one, where they posted a college basketball NBA draft story on the front page of because I clicked on it. I'm thinking, what FAU players decided to NBA draft? Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I don't know if they've updated it yet, but if they haven't updated the week 1 schedule, I doubt that they've updated the Florida Atlantic
No,
draft.
it's still there.
I know, right?
I can't imagine that nobody has alerted them.
They need editors badly.
Well, they just need somebody to review their page. This is still on the front page.
Yeah.
It's been there since 4:00 this afternoon.
Oh, oh man, 4 hours. Good Lord. Oh man. So here's a good one. Utah Baylor at 11 a.m. on ESPN. And we know what the big noon kickoff for week 2 will be. The Nebraska-Colorado game. Wow. Well, we know Alabama, Texas is 6 p.m. on ESPN. Oregon, Texas Tech will be on Fox, 6 p.m. Oklahoma State, Arizona State is Fox Sports 1, 9:30 p.m. The Auburn Shercon Tigers versus the California Pooh Bears. And I guess this is the only SEC Pac-12 matchup. That's going to be on ESPN. California is...
Well, Utah and Florida.
Oh, man, that is going to be so awesome. It's going to be on 8 p.m. on ESPN week 1 on Thursday night. Oh, man, that is the big one. Will Utah get revenge, or is Florida going to have their number? And let's see. Boise State, Washington will be a 2:30 game on ABC. And Coastal Carolina, UCLA is the late night game for week 1. I'm still amazed by Northwestern Rutgers being on CBS, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Love that.
I know, right? That's going to be one of the first Big Ten games on CBS.
Northwestern and Rutgers. What time is that game?
That's going to be 11 a.m. My
Central.
time where I'm at.
Okay.
I don't know if you're an hour ahead of me where you're at, or if you're an hour behind me.
Eastern time.
So that's a big noon kickoff.
Yep.
For CBS. I just wonder if Gary Danielson's going to be able to call both games, the Ohio State Indiana game and the Northwestern Rutgers game. He's going to have a lot of fun on week 1.
Ohio State, Indiana, and what do you mean?
Well, because of his Big Ten roots, his alma mater,
Sure.
Purdue. So
How is he going to be able to call both games?
I have no idea. Well, because I mean, he'll probably like call Ohio State, Indiana, and then like somebody's gonna call him up and say, "Hey, you also gotta go travel to New Jersey." But I have no idea what's going on there. But that'll be fun. The Battle of Miami, so that's gonna be fun. Week 3, we know that the Backyard Brawl is gonna be on ABC Saturday night. That will be terrific. Texas and Miami, I'm looking at it right now. That's a good one. Ole Miss Tulane, that's really good. SMU Oklahoma. For those who don't know why, it was because of Greg Sankey saying, "Hey, Georgia, you can't play Oklahoma." So that's why we're seeing the SMU Oklahoma game. And there's Bama, Texas.
Yep.
And Arizona, Mississippi State. Well, that's the other SEC Pac-12 game. I'm curious to see how they'll do this season. Wisconsin, Washington. You would think that they would make that a Pac-12 after dark game, but I guess they're like, do you want to put Alabama, Texas on ABC? No, let's put it on ESPN. Okay, we'll put Wisconsin on ABC.
You mean like a late night 10:30 game?
Yeah,
Yeah. On ESPN.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think that could have been the way they were going, but they've got Auburn, Cal, Wisconsin, Washington State actually did a nice number last year.
Oh, it sure did.
It was like the third highest rated game of the week, so
yeah,
they're giving it a nice spot right there and holding Auburn, Cal for the Pac-12 after dark. Nice.
That's going to be amazing. And I believe Stanford USC will be the Fox late night game, 9:30, 10:30. So that'll be really sweet to watch. Yep. And
Right, Jackson. Anything else you wanted to hit on these games?
a little more on week 3.
Where are we here? Week 3.
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to give a big shout out to Houston as they start their first ever conference game in the Big 12 era against TCU, and it's a home game for Houston. That's going to be sweet. And we know that BYU Arkansas will be on ESPN2. So that's going to be a really big night. But between all those games, TCU Houston, BYU Arkansas, Pittsburgh West Virginia, where would you rank? Because like me personally, I'm gonna have like Pitt West Virginia 1 because that's the backyard brawl. Thank goodness we get to see that again for another few years. 2, I'm thinking BYU Arkansas, and 3 TCU Houston. What do you think, Mark?
Wow, that's a tough call. I'm okay with any one of those 3 games. Yeah, I'll go with your ranking on that one. TCU Houston number 3. Yeah, that's a close one. Maybe I'll go TCU Houston number 2 as a conference game. And with Houston joining the Big 12, yeah, I'll go with that one number 2.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. Flipping between all 3 games. That's going to be really cool. And Kansas, Nevada, that's the late night game. Well, we finally figured out where Kansas State, Missouri's going to be. That's going to be on SEC Network. So that's going to be pretty cool. The old Big 12 reunion.
Yep.
So that'll be fun. What's your take on the announcements?
Oh, I can't say that anything surprises me or is anything. I think my biggest take is that when we found out that NBC and CBS had a new contract with the Big Ten, that I think we all had certain games in our minds as being prominent games that obviously were the reasons why CBS and NBC forked over a ton of cash to see, Penn State and Wisconsin, or Ohio State and Maryland, or I'm not going to the very top tier games, but just below that, USC, UCLA join, and USC and Iowa, or all these games that are good conference games. Those are the games that we were thinking about. The first announcement, Iowa, Penn State for CBS, that to see CBS and NBC being put in a position that, because there's only so many of those games to go around, that they're going to be showing Maryland, Charlotte, they're going to be showing Northwestern, Rutgers. That's kind of interesting to me.
Well, what you said about the Big Ten reminds me of something for week 3. The big noon kickoff for week 3 will be Penn State, Illinois. Will Penn State get a shot at revenge in Champaign, Illinois, or is Illinois going to have their number like they did in 2021? And we find out that Louisville, Indiana is going to be on the Big Ten Network.
Louisville, Indiana. Okay.
Yeah, that's one right there. Illinois, Kansas. Unfortunately, we still don't know what network that's going to be on, because that's a Big 12 game. So you may see it on ESPN. You may see it on a Fox channel. Who knows? We don't know what network Pittsburgh, Cincinnati will be on still, but that will be a good one. Curious to see what Scott Satterfield brings for Cincinnati. Louisville's not missing them, that's for sure.
I don't think so. I think they've upgraded as their head coach.
Yeah. So,
all right, man. Well, thanks for dropping by and going through the schedule.
Thank you.
All right, Jackson. Have a good night.
You too.
Keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Nick, thank you so much for the contribution. So much appreciated. Mark, if Michigan wins the Natty, I have intel that Harbaugh in the postgame will walk to the podium shirtless, drenched in milk, wide-eyed, and a sly smirk. I think it's what you want to see while Ryan Day sobs. Yeah, that's certainly what I would crave to see any day of the week. National championship or not, would be Jim Harbaugh shirtless, drenched in milk. I don't even know what mind conjures up those type of images. So I'm kind of questioning that, Nick, but I appreciate the contribution. And unless it's abusive or offensive in it, well, you know what? That might go against my guidelines, because I've read every super chat that's ever been delivered on this platform for years and years and years, however many of those have been, except for I can think of maybe 2, because they were clearly abusive or offensive toward a particular group or whatever. Of course, we won't read those, but this may draw across a different line. Yes, Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, the image of that, again, I can't relate to the mind that conjures up such images. We've got our buddy Kyle Loomis on the line from E2C Network to talk some Auburn football. Kyle, how you doing?
I'm doing well, but I don't know how I'm feeling after that thing you just read.
Yeah, I apologize.
Oh, no, you're good. I'm just
For
trying to
that.
understand it myself. Oh, man. Interesting, though. Some good schedule conversation, it seems like y'all are having today. Exciting to get
We
some
are.
things to talk about.
So the latest is, of course, that this 177 model is being taken seriously under consideration that would seem to protect Alabama Auburn, but take away the Auburn series with Georgia on an annual basis.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that and other ramifications of possibly going in that direction?
It's a good question. It's one that I go back and forth on. The nostalgia person in me, lover of history in terms of college sports and obviously Auburn related sports, doesn't like this because this is the Deep South's oldest rivalry. There's a contingency of Auburn fans that will tell you that this is what they crave more than the Iron Bowl. I question them openly a lot because some of them are my good friends, but it is a very important part of Auburn's culture, of Auburn's history, and the dynamics, the relationship that's shared between Auburn and Georgia is almost just as unique as between Auburn and Alabama. That one's obvious. We're in state. That whole, they like to call it big brother, little brother dynamic. But the Georgia Auburn one is more of one of commonality, one of almost like brotherly rivalry, where we're almost on the same playing field. Maybe not so much right now. It's hard to win 2 national championships in a row. Congratulations, UGA. Pains me to say that. I would hate to see that go away simply for the history fact of it. But if it's what's got to happen to make this new fascinating world of the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma coming in work, then there are worse things that could happen. But I think it's a shame for Auburn and Georgia fans, but I think it's a loss for college football to lose the Deep South's oldest rivalry too.
Yeah, I totally agree, because if you don't know the geography, if you know your geography well enough to know where universities are placed, and I'm hoping, although I have my doubts based on some of these YouTube videos you see where people are asked geography questions and history questions on the street, that people understand where these universities are located. However, you don't always know where they're located within the state, nor are you thinking about who could be in even closer proximity across state lines. And of course, that's what you're alluding to with Auburn and Georgia being extremely close in proximity. And again, it's the South's oldest rivalry. And what the Big Ten is considering, in addition to these regimented models, is a flex protect schedule, where they determine that each school has a different number of rivals that should be protected. School A may have 3, school B may have 2, etc. And they're going to build a schedule around that. And that's what I've suggested for years and years and years, going back to what we currently see: Auburn, Georgia as designated non-division rivals, and Tennessee and Alabama. Yes, absolutely protect those. But Kentucky, Mississippi State, those are placeholders. There's no reason for them to be playing every year. Texas A&M and South Carolina, I can't think of 2 schools that have less to do with one another in the SEC. Why are they playing every year? Well, because they have to have placeholders for everyone. Why?
Exactly. Think about this too, Mark. If I have this number correct, Texas A&M and Georgia have played once since the inception of Texas A&M to the SEC. That is a product of some of this.
Yes. But it's been necessary that Texas A&M and South Carolina have played 12 straight years.
Go figure. I mean, no offense to my friends from South Carolina, but that's just not a matchup that I guess maybe I should look at the numbers before I say this, but I don't feel like that favors South Carolina all that often, unless it was last year.
It's just not needed.
It's not. It really isn't. So, I mean, I'm open to a flex schedule if whatever retains the Georgia and Auburn rivalry and the Iron Bowl, I'm open to it, but I've got my orange and blue glasses on. So it's not hard to satisfy me, but I can imagine where whatever scenario you come up with, someone is not going to have a fair shake of things. Someone's going to get the raw end of the stick. You talked about this forget what the name of it or what people are referring to it as, but like 3 common opponents you play every single year. I think at one point in one scenario, Alabama was complaining they would get the shaft every year, or if it was Auburn that kept Alabama and Georgia, that you'd have to give them Vanderbilt to make up for what they have to compete with every year. So it doesn't seem like there's a scenario that is a fix-all. And that's why it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah, I'm not claiming that it's easy, but it struck me, well, this was a long time ago. This was at least 10 football seasons ago when Alabama and LSU, and it really, the example should pertain to any two teams, random teams playing in the same division, but it was even more of an emphasis because Alabama and LSU, this was at a time when they were the 2 best teams in the conference. And in this particular season, Alabama was playing Tennessee and Kentucky in the other division. And those 2 teams went 1-15 in the SEC that year. One of them went 0-8, the other 1-7. And LSU, competing for the same division championship, was playing Georgia and Florida, who combined to go 14-2. So you have 2 teams that are competing for a division championship that play 5 opponents exactly the same in their own division, then play the only 2 differences on their schedule. One of them plays 2 teams that went 1-15, and the other one plays 2 teams that went 14-2. Now, if that can't be avoided by random chance that we can't foresee the future, I understand it, but that was a byproduct of playing your designated rival and then having this ridiculous rotating schedule among 6 teams. So
yeah, and I think that some of the things that we have that we feel are wrong with the scheduling now with the SEC, they weren't as big, as much as it doesn't make sense for Texas A&M. We keep harping on this, but the Texas A&M South Carolina thing, it was like that 1 or 2 things that was wrong with the scheduling thus far. Now with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, it's exacerbating the messed up nature with which we have. I know this is stupid, but Missouri's in the East. Yeah. I mean, that is the most asinine thing that I can ever like my geography, like mine, just cannot wrap my head around it. I've always struggled with that. So it not only doesn't line up, but they are the furthest west school in the conference. So it's not like it just, okay, well, they're further west than these other 2 teams here. No, they're the furthest west in the entire conference. Yeah, it's a petty reason to be upset about it, but I remember the day that was announced, and I said, this is a joke. Some parody account is saying this, and no, it came straight from the SEC office. Missouri will be part of the East.
Yeah,
it is what it is, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So looking forward to whatever they come out with these SEC meetings, although it seems like Kirby Smart is pretty much fed up with this conversation too. So for his sake, I guess we better get it figured out.
Yes. When you hold that position, you can speak out and say whatever you want. Pretty much, you've won a zillion games in a row and 2 national championships. You can say whatever you want, and it holds weight. I will ask you this before we let you go, Kyle. Of course, this is a month where looking forward to 2024 and beyond is even more important than what's on the horizon for August, because recruiting is so heavy 365 days out of the year in the SEC, but specifically in June with all the official visits. Anything in particular over the next several weeks that is probably going to catch your eye?
Yeah, I was just talking about this on our Wednesday night live stream. It feels like we've entered that period where obviously transfer portal's done effectively. Obviously anything can still happen, but with traditional high school recruiting, we've got a lot of these kids that are going to start visiting throughout the summer leading up to the fall. There's a few official visits that are about to start occurring even, I think, this next week. I would say there's one particular wide receiver commit that I shouldn't say commit yet, prospect that has been out there. Cam Coleman is his name. A lot of people thought he would commit earlier in the spring part of the semester, but has not done so yet. 5-star wide receiver out of, I'm forgetting his school right now at the top of my head, but he'll be taking like his third unofficial. I think this one's actually an official visit, but his like in total third or fourth visit in the last few months to Auburn. You don't do that if you're not really heavily considering committing to the Tigers. So that I feel like would be a big thing for Auburn fans to watch, to see if that actually does finally happen. And Auburn's picked up some guys in the transfer portal wide receiver wise, both that, really experienced guys that are going to help them this year, but even guys that are going to be here for quite some time. But we're still wanting to rebuild up that young core base of wide receivers that really needs to start happening now while we've got some help that's just come in. So I think that one would be one for Auburn fans to watch, get excited about. I think there's a linebacker commit out there too, that prospect, I should say, that may also be that. But wide receiver right now is kind of where I got my eyes focused on.
Kyle, thank you so much for stopping by, and just let everyone know where they can find you. We will certainly get the banner up here.
Of course. Yeah. Any E2C network, anywhere you can find me.
Kyle, thank you so much for stopping by. Good to see you. And we will catch up with you soon. Enjoy the beginning of the summer.
Yes. It's going to be good stuff, and excited as we get closer and closer to football season. So we always appreciate you letting us come on and talk.
All right, Kyle. Thank you so much.
Of course.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Chris has been awfully patient for quite some time. Chris, how are you doing tonight?
Fine. Can you hear me?
Sorry you couldn't make it on sooner. We tried to get you on there, but could not hear
Oh, no,
you.
I tried to answer you. I my microphone, I guess, is either wasn't working or I actually was trying to call you. But I was going to ask you, Mark, in your introduction to the show, you mentioned, I think you did anyway, you said something about maybe a simple way, I guess, to address those disputed, I guess they were disputed titles. And
Yes.
Didn't you kind of suggest that there might be a simple way to do it? I thought you kind of did.
Oh, if I said that, then I either misspoke or something got miscommunicated. I'm not saying that it's simple.
Well, I thought you did. I thought you kind of suggested that a +1, or if there wasn't. So you said
No. I was talking about that we're currently doing a series
yeah.
where I've reviewed 3 or 4 seasons during the playoff era, and I'm going to continue to go back in time. But really, in terms of disputing championships, at least for me personally, I'm not going to dispute anyone who won a national championship during the playoff era. I may dispute the selection of the 4 teams, but I'm not going to dispute the championship team. Now, once we hit the BCS era in 2013, I think it becomes much more of an interesting topic. And then I was just stating that there are a number of different content ideas to attack this topic. And one would be to go through each season and implement the +1.
Oh, well, isn't that the same thing as what I just said?
Well, I wasn't saying that I'm suggesting it or that it was simple. I was just simply saying that it's a possibility for content to see what that scenario would look like. All right. We've lost Chris. We'll move it on to Tim's on the line. Look at this. Tim, what's going on? I believe you're muted. I hope I didn't do that myself.
I am muted. That's probably a good call. Just checking in. We go over the fact that, as always, the Pac-12 network did us no favors by starting at the Heisman campaign for Caleb being on Pac-12 network, which means that probably about 8 people will see the first 2 games.
Yeah, let's see here. And that's surprising, not if it were a week 1 game, but since it's a week 0 game, you would think we could get that somewhere else.
Yeah, well, it's going to be buried pretty darn good because, like I said, even fans, they search high and wide to try to get that game, and it's just almost impossible to get. Most people don't have most Trojan fans don't have Pac-12 network, so you have to search for it.
Do you get it?
I do get it, but I mean, I pay through the nose because I literally get a cable subscription just for the Pac-12 network, which is actually a total waste of time and money. But there's not many other ways you can do it. So that's the problem.
I never hit the Pac-12 network. Now, when I moved here a year ago, I then selected it. So I did have it for quite some time up until just a few weeks ago. Yeah. So that was my first exposure to the Pac-12 network and to the Pac-12 credit network. To their credit, despite all the negative that I've heard and people dumping on the Pac-12 network, from the standpoint of production, I watched the conference media days, for example, last year, and I thought they were very well done.
Yeah, no, the production quality is well done. The analysts they have are excellent. And the announcers are solid. It's just a distribution. Nobody can see it thanks to Larry Scott's genius, Yeah. So, and Kliakov hasn't done much to fix that either. So goodbye Pac-12. That's one thing I will not miss about you guys is no one being able to see USC games. And again, starting off, you think it'd be a great opportunity for Caleb on week 0. All eyes would be on him. But nobody's gonna see that game. So that's the Pac-12 network for you.
Well, fortunately for him, we're all aware of who he is.
Well, but you do want to have that exposure. You do want to go out there and have that exposure. He's going to light up, for obvious reasons. He's going to light up San Jose State. But there's going to be a lot of other guys that will be vying for the same award. They're going to be on national television smoking some Little Sisters of the Poor, whereas they won't see him. So it's not a big deal. The big games, like for instance, we know that the Notre Dame games will be on NBC at 7:30 Eastern. So that's always a good time for a player to showcase what they can do. And then I think the week 3 game against Stanford, that's going to be on Fox. But the first 2, granted, it is against San Jose State and Nevada. Nobody's going to see those games. So that's just the way it is.
Has there been a time, Tim, that you thought a USC player was more deserving of the Heisman consideration than they received? And maybe it was because of the time at which the games were played.
There have been a number of Trojans that probably should have won the award that didn't. Is that the road you're going down? Because of the West Coast?
Whether they should have won the award or they should have at least been considered and they weren't.
Well, you got to go back pretty far. But if you go back to like guys like Anthony Davis, we're definitely going to argue this one because of the gentleman who won. But what Anthony Davis did to Notre Dame alone, and the numbers and his career as well, I'm surprised he didn't win the Heisman Trophy. But it's an award it's very regional award, and it's hard. I think you have an uphill battle. Would you not agree that if you're on the West Coast, I mean, how many players have won from West Coast teams? Not many. Maybe a couple at Stanford, and then USC, and one from Oregon. Most of them go, east of the Mississippi.
Well, there's also less prominent schools out there. There's only a handful.
But the numbers are pretty small for the amount of play. If you think about the players that played in the Pac-12 that didn't win, I mean, think we got here. You go. He's not a Trojan, but I forgot his name. Running back from Stanford.
Who, Tommy Vardell or
No.
Christian McCaffrey? Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman Trophy. Yes.
Right. McCaffrey, because he plays on the West Coast, a lot of people didn't see his games. He's in the Pac-12. That guy should have won a Heisman, but that's a pretty good example. He's not a Trojan, but that's a good example of not having the exposure you need. So there's one guy. But I was really just coming on to once again pump the next Sunday show with Anthony.
Yeah, throw it up there if you've got it.
Oh wait, hold on. All right. So for the very few, because I've done a bunch of these, those of you guys that have not seen this yet, we're gonna have Anthony Munoz on June 4th at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 Pacific. And I don't know how to say it to you guys. I mean, he absolutely dominated Hall of Famers on the other side of the ball. But he went through a lot of difficult times in his childhood. he was often, a lot of people probably don't know, but he only played 16 games in college. But those 16 games he did play, he was dominant. But then he went on to play 13 years in the NFL and only missed 3 games in a 13-year career where he had, I believe, 11 All-Pros, NFL Man of the Year in 1991, Bengals Ring of Honor, and then obviously ending up with the gold jacket in the Hall of Fame. But he literally, I asked him, hey, how long can we have? I understand you're probably really busy. And he said, whatever it takes, an hour is fine. Because I said, I've got an hour's worth of questions, but I don't know how long you have. He said, an hour's fine, or how long it takes. So that's just the kind of guy that he is. I think we're going to have a really good time with him. I've watched him do interviews, and like on Dan Patrick's show, this could be the easiest interview in the world. You just kind of hand it off to him. He's not the microphone's not a mystery to him. So you guys will be in for a treat if you guys can check that out. So
there's probably no reason why we can't just keep that up for the remainder of the show. And just let people know that's Sunday, June 4th.
I'm beyond excited about this. I started preparing for it. I had the questions, but really I've watched him, with Eisen, and I mean, look at the people I'm saying that are interviewing him, right? And then there's Tim Prangley, which is it's a crazy anomaly. But he's, it's the power of the Trojan family, and he's just a really generous, wonderful person. And I reached out to him, and he said yes.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. That is great. That is great. And again, if you're a college football fan or an NFL fan and could care less about USC, these are the kind of guys that I certainly make time for and want to hear from as just a fan of the sport.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of film because I remember as a kid growing up watching him, but I've watched a lot recently. If you guys want to YouTube it, there's a really good video. He was on this one ESPN. They're doing top 100 players when they did their all-century team. Mm-hmm. He came in at 14, and they did a huge 10-minute segment on him, and the who's who of pass rushers, and he's just pushing them into the ground. He had his own stance where he literally created his own stance. He's not in a 3-point stance. He was up and he had one leg cocked backwards behind him. He was going to offset stance, and it just allowed him to get off quicker. And you just watch these guys, and there's nowhere for them to go. He just uses his frame, uses his feet so well, his bend perfectly, and you're watching future Hall of Famers just have a hard time even getting a pass rush, let alone getting to the quarterback. So it's pretty amazing. And also, he was one of the first people. He actually ran long distances when he was in college. In order to get fit for games. And there's a play in that 1980 Rose Bowl where Charles White takes the ball off the left side, has to cut back. That's how Anthony catches up to him. But Anthony's right next to him when he gets tackled about 25 yards downfield. I mean, that's, you're talking about a guy who's like about 6'5", 6'6". I don't know how big he was, but 290, 300 pounds, just moving that way. And he was like one of the first big linemen to actually run distances in the offseason in order to have the stamina to play these kind of teams. So it's an amazing story. He grew up in a single parent household. He went to USC. Like I said, 6 games into the 78 season, some guy hits him high. Another guy comes in with his helmet right to the side of his knee, totally dirty shot, knocks him out for the whole season. And then the same thing happened in the 79 season, but he swore he'd come back, and he actually had to convince John Robinson to let him even just practice in order to have a chance to play in that Rose Bowl. And John Robinson, yeah, sure. But he did. He came back from that knee surgery, practiced a little bit, and he's like, "Hey, coach, I want to do some contact drills." "Oh, take it slow, Anthony." He's like, "No, I want contact drills." They got him out there, and sure enough, he could handle it, and he played that bowl game. So, I mean, I'm sure it was not only a lift for the team as far as having an amazing offensive tackle, but just the motivation for the team that he came back from that devastating injury to help lead them in that Rose Bowl is pretty amazing.
Right, Tim. Appreciate you stepping by. Anything else you wanted to hit on?
No, we need to have a conversation about, you keep saying that the Trojan defense is horrible. We could do that another night, but you got to just remember this, on the USC, the team, they have basically brand new guys. If you look at their defense, they got Anthony Lucas from Texas A&M, Kyon Barnes from ASU, Sullivan from Purdue, Jamil Muhammad. Probably a lot of people don't know he's from Georgia State, but he's a converted quarterback that's now a rush end. Mason Cobb from Oklahoma State.
Yes.
Shane Lee from Alabama.
Yep.
And just down the list. These guys, and we got some guys back that were hurt. So I think that you guys, just like I told you last year about the offensive line, I think you guys are gonna be a little bit surprised by the difference because, we still have our question marks about can Grinch coach? What's his scheme? But last year there was a definite. Looking at that defense, you could tell that these guys were not USC caliber defenders. I'm not calling them by name, but they just weren't producing, missing tackles, etc. This is a whole different. This is a brand new defense, and the guys I just named were all starters on their teams, and high caliber recruits when they were picked up. So, and I thought Bear Alexander. That's one more guy that we just got. So, I mean, I think you're going to see a completely different front seven, and also at linebacker, Eric Gentry was hurt. He got hurt in an ankle injury he had against Utah, and he was not the same the rest of the year. He actually had surgery in the offseason in the spring, and he's going to be back 100% as well. So he's an interesting guy in the middle. So you guys take your shots at USC's defense now. I think that we're all going to have a different conversation sometime in the middle of the season next year.
We should get this super chat in here. Nick says, Tim, how do you feel about the Big Ten saving USC?
Well, just like any person that's floating in the middle of the ocean and the National Guard comes up with their boat and throws you a lifeline, because it might have been interesting to see if we hadn't had Larry Scott was the problem of this whole thing. You saw that there was a problem in coaching. USC definitely didn't help the conference by having Helton that long. The conference didn't help themselves out by not sticking it for USC and letting USC get those ridiculous sanctions against them that were completely unbalanced. So it's a shame because the Pac-12 kind of did this to themselves. And the fact that USC looked at it and said, okay, so what can we do here? What's going to happen with the rest of the conference? What are we going to do for like a media rights, et cetera? They took one look at that, and then Fox and the Big Ten said, hey, why don't you come over here and make like double or triple what you'd be making there? And it was a no-brainer because USC was irrelevant. You listen to an Oregon fan, you listen to some not Larry, but some Utah fans just saying, oh, USC's irrelevant. They're yesterday you. Well, we were irrelevant until we weren't. And we're going to leave, and then the conference is probably never going to be the same. I don't think it's folding. I don't think they're all running to the Big 12 like everyone thinks, but it won't be the same without USC, clearly.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you being here. All right. Just at the time that we were going to end the show, now we've got 3 callers. So we'll hit up these 3 calls pretty quick here. Will, what's going on tonight?
Mark, what's up, my friend?
Not too much. How you doing?
I love looking at the schedules and getting excited for the games I'm going to watch. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'll be watching Notre Dame and Navy. I'll be keeping my eye on USC, even though I know they're probably going to name the score on San Jose State. But yeah, it's nice having like your team playing on week 0 instead of just trudging through the group of 5 teams and whoever Nebraska is playing. Yeah. But getting to week 1.
Yeah.
Michigan and East Carolina. Looking at that game, for some reason, maybe it was because they're playing at North Carolina school. But I remember the last time Michigan opened their season on a new TV network. And, of course, the App State thing happened. I'm not saying that will happen, but it's kind of a similar team that Michigan's bringing back to what they brought back in 2007.
East Carolina's not a bad football team.
Yeah. So, I still think the Wolverines will win, but I'll keep my eye on that one. Now, one that I do think that could be an upset, and it's not because the team that they're playing is super good, is Miami and Miami of Ohio. I have a feeling that this could be Middle Tennessee Part 2. There's a part of me that has me wanting to put a little bit on Miami of Ohio money line. And if they do win, I think they need to be only called the Hurt. I don't think TV announcers should be able to call them Miami if they lose to Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, it's an interesting start to the season for Miami of Florida because they've got
Yeah.
that game on a Thursday night. Then they play Bethune-Cookman the next week on a Thursday night. So a Friday night, then a Thursday night for Miami of Ohio or Miami of Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, I'm gonna be really excited to see how good Kyle McCord's gonna be the starter for the Buckeyes. Right? Is it all but confirmed?
We believe so.
I'm definitely interested to see how well he looks going in week 1 against the Hoosiers, because of course he will be heading to South Bend, and I am very excited for that game. I'm definitely more hopeful heading into this year with Sam Hartman at quarterback than Tyler Buckner last season, but we'll see how that goes. For sure. And sorry, my Wi-Fi is down. Can you scroll a little bit? I have other games. Or I don't have to say too much more. I know I don't want to take up your time. But yeah. Boise State and Washington will be, Boise State is the program that they are, and Washington's looking very strong, but I'm also kind of intrigued in that game. And then And I'm definitely interested in seeing Vandy week 0, because I think betting Vandy the over this year seems like a pretty good one. And it would be nice to see them make a bowl game this year. I feel like this is their best chance. I mean, if Clark Lee wants to build the best program in the country, I think definitely making a bowl game in 4 years.
Yeah, you kind of have to make a bowl game.
Yeah.
To
Mm-hmm.
make that claim. Yeah. And get you into the top 80 or so.
And the battle for the Carolina will be fun this year.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
like that game.
That's a toss-up game.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, it's in Columbia and not in Charlotte like it was last time.
Yeah, I like that game.
So it should be a great atmosphere with the sandstorm entrance. And then I love my Mountaineer fans out there, but to me that game just looks like a bloodbath. Like I don't think I can see the Mountaineers making a bowl game this year. I would love to see them do it, but for Joey, Mountaineer Paul, Coos, and all those guys, but
yeah, I think they're probably the worst team in the conference. I don't know. I shouldn't say that without taking a deep dive on them, but they're in that group.
Yeah. I don't know how good Central Florida will look either, but yeah. Well, I know you're on a crunch, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time, Mark. Maybe we can.
I appreciate you calling, Will.
Yeah, maybe we can go through this deeper another time.
Oh yes,
when my
we've
Wi-Fi
got
isn't
3
down.
months, so yes, we will definitely. So anytime you want to call up and bring up the schedule, we will dive back into it.
All right, see you later.
Thanks, Will. Have a good night. We got the real MVP checking in tonight. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, as always.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am good.
Well, I saw this SEC schedule decision between 8 or 9 conference games, and Mark, the 9 conference games would be beneficial to literally everybody, in my opinion, except for the SEC, which is why I don't think it's going to happen at all. The SEC will probably stay at 8 because there's no benefit for them to go to 9.
Except possibly revenue.
But would the revenue they make from going to 9 be more than what they would get from postseason play?
Well, I would have to do the math. I would have to be exposed to the math. I can't answer that, but it's probably not significant enough to worry about.
Well, that's true, but I think if you have 8, there's a greater chance of having at least 3 or 4 teams in the playoff. Because I think it's more likely that you'll have an Oklahoma or an LSU type team that's just right on the bubble, lose the final week of the season, have that extra loss, and it bumps them out of the race. Where if you go to 8, you beat up on Central Connecticut State 63-3, then you're in the playoff.
Yes. So we are looking at 12 teams in a playoff, and a group of 5 gets a spot. We're looking at 11 between those 5 conferences, and maybe it's going to be 4 conferences. We'll see. But in an average year, I would guess that the SEC is going to get 3 and the Big Ten is going to get 3. And then there's going to be let me do the math, 5 between the other 3 conferences, something like that. I don't know that that's going to happen very often, where there's the 8 to 9 game schedule is going to determine a playoff spot.
I don't know how often it'll happen, but I'm pretty sure it'll happen. It'll happen more often than with an 8-team conference schedule. And I saw somebody, Daniel Henry, said, "I'm openly acknowledging SEC rigging the system." Hey, listen, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yes.
Until the NCAA steps in and says you must play non-conference games, then that's your all's problem, not my problem.
Yeah. And it would be one thing if they were trying to rig the system to their advantage in any possible way, and then they were going to playoff games and losing, and going to bowl games and losing out of conference games, and posting ACC and Pac-12 kind of out of conference records, but they're not. They are dominating. They're dominating, and then they are also able to skew these various aspects of the formats of the conference and the scheduling to their advantage. So why not?
Mark, can you pull up the super chat that just came in? Because it directly addresses me personally.
Nick, thank you so much for the contribution. To Real MVP, why have you ripped Michigan for their non-conference schedule, but the Mark Rogers community has not heard a peep from you regarding Georgia's weaker non-conference schedule? Smells like a little SEC bias to me.
Now, I'll be honest. I don't know how you could say Georgia versus Michigan, which one's weaker. I mean, they're both facing what? Cream puffs. Now, instead of having what? I mean, it's like having a chocolate cupcake versus a vanilla cupcake. I mean, they're both going to beat the living soul out of their opponents.
Yes.
Most likely. So I don't understand that saying Georgia's schedule is weaker than Michigan. I mean, they've both probably got, what, a 99.99% chance to win all their non-conference game this season. But from what I understand, Georgia didn't back out of that game. It was the SEC that stepped in and said, you can't play it because you won't be able to return the trip. So unless if I'm wrong about that and Georgia backed out, if Georgia did back out, I would obviously rip Georgia because I don't think that's fair to schedule somebody and then back out. I mean, last year, I ripped into Tennessee for backing out of their game against BYU.
So the worst thing about this super chat is that they misspelled my last name. So that would be number one. Beyond that, there's a few things to consider here. So one would be, as you mentioned, Georgia did not make a decision. The SEC, to my understanding, made the decision because Oklahoma is entering the league the next season. George, sorry, we're not taking any more. I got Dr. Buckeye on here, David. Anyway, been on here too long. So anyway, so there's a difference between just, yeah, I lost my train of thought. I guess the view of George there for a second. George, we love you. Talk to you soon. Call back anytime. Again, that the decision makers were not the teams involved, and Michigan apparently made, based on everything I know, made the decision to drop UCLA. The other thing is that Georgia just played Oregon last year. And they're playing Georgia Tech. So for Georgia to schedule a strong Power 5 opponent, non-conference, is adding to them playing Georgia Tech. Now, some people might laugh and say, it's Georgia Tech, blah, blah, blah. Well, Georgia Tech's 3 times better than anybody that Michigan's playing, number one. Number two, Georgia has no control over how good Georgia Tech is, but they are playing that as a rivalry game. And as recent as 4 years ago, Georgia Tech was going to bowl games. And as recent as 8 years ago, Georgia Tech was playing in the ACC championship game. So they can be good. When you're scheduling Colorado State and Hawaii, you know what you're getting. A team that shouldn't be in your classification as opposed to scheduling Georgia Tech. So, yeah, I just don't think that there's any comparison between Georgia, who is always going to play at least one Power 5 non-conference game, and Michigan. Now, before I let you go to real MVP on this, the counter to that would be that the Big Ten plays the 9 conference games, and therefore they're already playing that 9th Power 5 while the SEC does not.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, you're right that they play one more conference game, but that's their choice. They can easily go to 8. They could go to 7 or 10. It's their choice. But if you want to say, hey, about the non-conference opponents, I just don't think it's fair to compare Georgia's situation to Michigan's situation. I think comparing Tennessee's situation last year to Michigan's is fair, because from what I've heard, Tennessee removed BYU to the schedule and added Army instead. But it's part of the game. Listen, until we get a governing body, a commissioner, then guess what? You're going to have there's no reason not to play a big opponent. Actually, I think it's smarter to play a bunch of quote-unquote cream puffs. Because if Georgia went 12-0 last year, regardless of who they played at non-conference schedule, they were probably going to be in the college football playoff. The only difference is instead of being the 1 seed, they might have been the 2 seed. But they were still easily going to win the national championship, in my opinion, either way. So I don't understand the significance of this big non-conference game right now in the 4-team playoff. Now, in 12, I think it's going to change. But under 4-team, I don't see any benefit to it.
Chief Brody, thank you for the contribution here. States Michigan has played 2 out-of-conference away games since 2015. Let me think what those are. I believe they're both against Notre Dame off the top of my head. 2015. No, Utah and Notre Dame, 1 each. Georgia has played 5, which is Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. Oh, they must be 1 Notre Dame and the other 4 Georgia. Anyway, he doesn't state there. Alabama's played 1, which was Texas last year. And I don't know what ND with that cupcake schedule means. Oh, 7. I don't know what that means. Yeah. So, Chief, I don't know what your point is. Yeah, I don't know if you can read that derail, but I don't know what his point is.
I mean, I can read it, but putting all those words together in that format.
Yeah, doesn't make it. I don't know what his point is.
Right. I know what each individual word means, but when you combine them all in that order.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know who he's slamming or who he's sticking up for.
Right. I have no idea what that means.
Other than I guess Michigan has only played 2 away games in 2015. And then I don't even know that you can put Notre Dame in the same sentence because all their games are out of conference games. So,
right. I guess he assumes big time, quote unquote, big time non-conference games, but that's a subjective meaning.
Yeah. Temple. No. UT is Texas. Okay. Texas, Michigan State, Northwestern, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. Yeah. Well, they're playing all non-conference games. So they're going to play more quality non-conference games because that's all they're playing.
Right. That's they're forced to do it that way. So I don't know. I don't understand what he means by that, Mark, to be honest with you. But
I said the other day, and nothing has changed, that I do understand the argument that some will make that the SEC should play 9 games. And from a practical standpoint, just the larger you make the conference and do not increase the non-conference or the conference schedule, then you just create this situation where your championship is less valid because there are more teams in the league that each team is not playing. They're not playing 7 teams in this expanded 16-team conference going forward if they stay at 8 conference games. And then they create this, if they go to no divisions, create this probability that many years there's going to be a controversy over who's going to the championship game. It won't be a controversy because they'll have a format, but okay, Texas, Tennessee, and LSU all went 6-2 in the conference. Who's going to the SEC championship game, kind of thing?
Right. But Mark, don't you think that could be intentional? Because if you're going into a 12-team playoff, listen, you don't know which one of those three you got to pick. So you know what you got to do? You got to pick all three of them to be in the playoff, Mark.
Oh,
listen, it's smarter, not harder football, okay? And you know, and I know that the SEC's already got this presumption, which I think is deserved, that they're the best conference. So if they're all 6-2, they're all probably going to be ranked inside the top 12 anyway. And if one of them plays, and especially if that 1-6-2 team beats an 8-0 team, then those 4 teams are probably going to be selected to the playoffs.
And you give the committee a dilemma of, do they leave out a team who lost an extra game only because they made the conference championship game? So they're getting penalized for playing in the conference championship game.
Right. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it should only be a positive. But I know it'll be a net negative. I know it'll eventually be where they'll drop a spot like they have done in the past.
Depending on their performance. Let's say it's a situation like this year. Georgia's the best team in the country, no question. LSU shows up, and let's say the scenario I just played out, LSU, Tennessee, and Texas all tied for second place in the SEC, and LSU is chosen for by whatever criteria. And I think in that situation, most likely, if Georgia's that good, and whoever wins the SEC, who's ever the number 1 seed, is going to be that good, that if LSU plays them well, they're going to be given credit for that. If they get destroyed, then they're going to get penalized for that. So even if they lose, but it's 28-27, everybody's going to pat them on the back and say, you know what, even though you're 10-3 because you just lost this game instead of 10-2, you're in the playoff.
Right. You're exactly right. But if they lose 45-3, then they'll be out probably.
Yeah.
Which, I don't necessarily agree with that logic. I think making the conference championship game, there should only be upside if you want to actually incentivize people to win their conference.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's the way it is. Now, Mark, there's something I want to ask you about. I doubt you watch any college baseball, but I have a legitimate point how this relates to football, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So there was a lot of what I believe was West Coast bias against them, because of how weak it is perceived they are in baseball, okay? And it's just been so regularly that even seeps to the committee members' minds. I'm worried that in football it's going to go that direction. Just year after year after year of the Pac-12, the Big 12 being so bad, you're going to have an 8-4, 9-3 SEC team that nobody thinks is really that good, can win the national championship, get in and over an 11-1 Big 12 or an 11-1 Pac-12 team. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yes. Eventually. It may take years, but I think where we're going to start is that the committee is generally going to, except for these strange aberrations where somebody lost, 2 games 48-3 or whatever, or they played Ohio State in a non-conference game and pulled off this great victory or something like that. But generally what you're going to have is 10-2 is pretty much going to be a playoff entry. The 10-2 record, it's been proven out. I went through the years of the last 10 years. 10-2 is going to get you in the playoff. 9-3 is going to be a situation where just about everybody misses the playoffs at 9-3, but there will be 1 or 2 that make it at 9-3. Like if there's 6 9-3 teams, 1 or 2 will have to be chosen, and that's going to be the interesting comparison. However, so those are going to be SEC teams, or an SEC and a Big Ten team, but generally SEC teams. But then, as this SEC dominance continues, both historically, recent history, and in non-conference matchups in that particular season, I think there are going to be situations where it's like, okay, not only did this 9-3 SEC team prove, but here we've got a tiebreaker between 8-4 LSU and 9-3 North Carolina. Well, LSU is going to the playoff. Sure.
Right. And I think because I like the baseball comparison, because in baseball it's really SEC, ACC, and then
Yeah.
it's just everyone else. So I think it's a really good indicator of where the sport's going to go with the Pac-12, Big 12, and ACC. I mean, they're almost looked at as G5 conferences in baseball. And I think that's where we're headed with these three people, these three conferences.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are Washington and you get blown out by Oregon, let's say, just completely blown out of them, and then you have an SEC team beat Oregon, okay? Would that Washington team get in compared to a 10-2 or 9-3 SEC team? I would have real reservations about it. I know it's just one game and you're using transitive property, but I mean,
well, we've already seen it in the 14 playoff. We've already seen the nod go to the SEC.
right.
And it's justified. It was I have an issue with it being justified historically because I think every season should stand on its own, but they're human beings in that room and it creeps into there's no question. But number two, I don't think that there has been a time that second SEC team did not justify it that season. A la Oregon, or I'm sorry, Georgia last year annihilating Oregon had they lost an SEC championship game, or Alabama and Georgia destroying their non-conference competition this season before.
Right. I agree with everything you said, Mark. The final thing I'll leave you with is I know Will and D gave you an upset pick. Central Michigan is going to
Yep.
beat Michigan State.
Ooh,
Okay. And if you want another one,
yeah.
UConn might beat NC State.
Yeah, I that caught my eye as well. I thought that was interesting. That's a week 0 game as well, right?
Right. And UConn's at home too.
Huh. NC
Which-
State signed to like sometimes these decisions are made and I don't understand them. Why NC State's going to UConn
I don't know, but hey, listen.
to play in front of 8,000 people?
Well, yeah. It's like a Vanderbilt sized crowd or a UCLA sized crowd there. But good for UConn having somebody of that caliber go up there. But I'm not sure if NC State's how good they really are. I think they're going to take a step back this year.
Our buddy Chief here gave it another shot. So he's telling us that his previous statement was sarcasm, which I have no issue with sarcasm. I just couldn't understand the statement regardless of whether it was sarcasm or not. And that says, if you consider the ACC plus Stanford, Navy, USC, their conference, okay, Notre Dame's conference, then these are Notre Dame's out of conference away games. Okay. All right. Well, I don't consider that their conference. They don't have a conference period, but okay, I understand what you're doing there, that they always play the ACC, Stanford, Navy, and USC. But the problem is even though that makes Notre Dame's out of conference games better than other teams, their conference sucks. If that's their conference, it's not a good conference.
Yeah, that's really bad.
It's
Really,
Navy,
really bad.
Stanford, USC's coming back, okay, and it's a lot of bad teams that they've mostly played in. Most of Notre Dame's non-conference games or their ACC contract is a bunch of bad teams.
Right.
Most of
6
it.
and 6, 7 and 5 type teams.
Yeah, they're really not. Yeah. Virginia Tech last year were horrible. They played Georgia Tech. They were terrible. Yes.
So anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you.
All right. Thanks to Real. Appreciate you.
Fight on to USC. Maybe next year you'll make the college baseball playoffs.
All right. All right. Let's close it out with our buddy David. How you doing?
Hey, Mark. Hi, and how are you? I was kind of hoping to get into the conversation that Tim was having earlier about Anthony Munoz. Maybe we could have had like a GOAT offensive line comparison between Anthony Munoz and Orlando Pace.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to have. The only thing I can say about that, I don't know, except I don't know that Anthony Munoz was around for the pancake block.
Yeah.
So,
Well, plus he probably brought up some old wounds there with mentioning 1979 with you there, Mark.
absolutely, that did that.
That
You know,
cuts, I know.
you know what went through my head today?
Yeah.
Because again, yes, you were around for the Buckeyes live show. I saw,
Yes.
you made comments and thank you for your contribution.
Sure.
In the during the Buckeye show, but there was a slam at some point, as there always is, on Ryan Day from a Michigan fan, and we both know that while Harbaugh's won the last 2 games, of course,
Yes.
that Ryan Day's teams have performed much better in the playoff than Jim Harbaugh's teams, and that got me to thinking about. I made this distinction not during that show, but it was a couple nights ago. I don't know if you caught it, where I think it's very easy to make the distinction in bragging rights. This is what Michigan has to brag about. And I'm not going to go through the whole tirade, but
Yes.
Michigan has these things to brag about against Ohio State. Ohio State has these things to brag about. I think it's very clear distinction. It's all factual, and they can both make their points. I, of course, think that the Ohio State argument is much more prominent, but I'm biased. I get it. But what went through my mind was that for as great as Bo was at Michigan, 21
Mhm.
years there, I believe they finished in the top 10 times, or 16 times out of 21 years. 16 times they were just lived in the top 10.
Mhm.
Number 4, number 6, number 8, number 9, number 3, just if you look at the line of 10-2, 9-1 seasons, depending on the number of games played, just lived in the top 10. Very impressive run of consistency. However, not only did Bo never win a national championship, he never placed his team in a position to play a postseason game, a Rose Bowl game for a national championship. Earl Bruce, who some may not recognize, had a better Big Ten record during his 9-year tenure than Bo Schembechler.
He did.
Had a better overall record.
And had the head-to-head, Mark,
And
over
had
Bo.
the head-to-head 5-4.
Yes.
That what he accomplished in 1979, even though he didn't close the deal, at least he had a consensus number 1 team, undefeated team, playing down to the final minute of the game against the most talented team in the nation. And Bo Schembechler never got that. He never brought his team to that point.
Right. Well, the closest he ever had was the teams like 72-74, where he
Yes.
went like 32-1, and that was before when the Big Ten only took 1 team to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
And he always went into the Ohio State game undefeated. I think that would probably be his closest to kind of contending over that period of time.
Yeah, in 1985, they backdoored a number 2 final ranking. And when I say backdoored, they had a great team. I'm not discounting their season, but they were never in the championship race because of the way things fell on New Year's Day. They finished number 2 in the polls.
Right, and then he had awful luck in Pasadena at 2-8 too.
Yeah.
So I want to get to the schedule. Just a couple of things. First of all, I just want to hit on a couple of the big non-conference games, but I want to ask you just kind of an overarching schedule question. Just what in general is your view, and maybe you've already put this out there, but maybe you haven't heard your opinion on it, on the emphasis on these night games and doing a lot more, especially in the Midwest here. It seems to putting more of the emphasis on the 7:30 games. Urban Meyer once argued that, he kind of liked the night games because he thought it would help with the recruiting. They get the recruits on campus and the nighttime atmosphere. It was kind of a draw. Just your overall thoughts? Because I'm kind of a traditionalist there. I like the noon, 3:30. Maybe that's also where I'm still a traditionalist on scheduling.
Well, the first thing that stood out to me about this first wave of Big Ten games on NBC and CBS is the weakness or the the mediocrity of the matchups. because at least without really thinking it through, my initial reaction to CBS and NBC signing a contract with the Big Ten was, well, all the big games are going to be on CBS and NBC in addition to Fox. Not vetting it out in my mind that there aren't enough of those kind of games to go around. Therefore, we're going to see Northwestern and Rutgers play on CBS, and we're going to see Maryland and Charlotte is going to be the first NBC, I believe it's the first NBC night game.
Right. Yeah, well, that's the thing I was just going to say, Mark. I mean, like, I'll use Ohio State as a general example. Like, I get them opening up with Notre Dame as a night game, but does anybody get the reason why they got to play Toledo at night? Yeah, I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's one thing to do like when you're playing a major opponent in a night game. I get that, but I don't know. Scheduling some of these cupcake games in the evening, in kind of non-interesting games like you mentioned, just I don't know, makes no sense to me.
What? Yeah. So I'm understanding your point if you view night games as being this. See, I'm not understanding where most people go with that. They think, okay, we're playing at night. This is a big deal, and I think I have a certain perspective on this just because it's hammered into my head from doing all these live streams for all these various teams that when it's announced that, oh, Florida State and Miami are playing a night game,
Yeah.
like it's suddenly this big deal when, okay, well, there's all sorts of night games going on. And obviously Fox determined that they're going to play their best game at noon Eastern time. And there's all sorts of great games being played at noon and 3:30. And I think it was brought to light for me personally, even more when I went through that television ratings series, because the games at noon and 3:30 do just as well as the games at night, maybe better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the general feeling I was going with, and maybe you were kind of going down this direction too, was if you want to do blue bloods at night, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama at Texas at night, or this year it's Texas at Alabama, I should say. I get that, but scheduling some cupcake at 7:30. In general, I just don't get that. Or a game that's not, kind of a non-interesting game like you just mentioned earlier. I just don't get.
No, actually, my point is, why does it matter? Why can't you play a cupcake at night?
Well, I mean, I would say let's just get it out of the way at noon and let's move on. You'd think that if you're a major, also a major network, you would be reserving that nighttime slot for like a big game.
Yeah, but as I just pointed out, it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, I can.
If we ran through the TV ratings right now, you would see just as many big games being played and receiving high ratings at noon and 3:30.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because ESPN always usually tried to make that. I mean, your former employer tried to make that like a feature game on Saturday night.
Oh, sure, and it is. But I just don't see even the ABC primetime game being as big a deal as it once was. Sometimes those games are not. A few games come to mind recently. Clemson and Boston College,
right,
was one of their selections last year.
Yeah,
and
well, like some games look good. Yeah, some games look good early, and then the teams like I thought we would be playing a good Wisconsin team at home last year. Ohio State would, but that was a bad Wisconsin team. You know,
that was an ABC game. That was a Fowler Herb Street game.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. They still chose it even after I believe Wisconsin had already lost to Washington State.
Yeah, it just well, now that you mention it, I guess it does. Noon 3:30. I guess the networks. I always thought kind of want to do something to kind of promote. I mean, you think if you're getting Fowler and Herb Street, they're going to want to be doing like a big time game, obviously.
But sometimes with all those various networks taking up all those games, that's kind of how it rolls. It it comes down to, okay, we don't have that kind of game left.
Yeah.
It's a bad week for games. There's only like 2 marquee games, and one's on CBS. It's an SEC game, and one's on Fox, and this is the best game. Or we've got like 4 mediocre kind of best games, and we're going to go to where the draw is.
Yeah.
Rather than seeing a good game between, I don't know, Pitt and North Carolina that's going to be competitive, we're going to go to Ohio State because people are going to watch the game, even though it's going to be over at halftime.
Yeah, sometimes I guess it's just having a lack of options of good games to choose from. Let's get to a couple of big games. Just want to get your early thoughts on them. Let's get to week 1. Kind of just early thoughts on Utah, Florida, Mark. I thought, Utah was my kind of trendy playoff pick, although I don't think I was the only one to pick Utah as a playoff team early in the season last year. And some would say that the swamp did not help their playoff hopes after going in there and having a disappointing loss. But
well, I also picked Utah to go to the playoff last year.
Oh, okay.
So that did not work out for me.
No.
But and I think I was coming off of 4 for 4 the year before. Anyway, maybe 2 years before. Anyway, Utah and Florida. Yeah, Utah needs to win this game. Florida's going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC, most likely. Still a roster with talent, but this is a big game for Utah in the Pac-12. But Cam Rising is really reeling from his off-season, from his injury late in the season. There's speculation that he's not going to be, able to practice a lot and really gear up for the season.
It'd be interesting to see how healthy or how he looks that first game. Well, that was kind of AR-15's coming out party last year for Florida, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm still amazed that he was a top 10, 12 pick, but that's that's a different discussion, right, Mark?
Yeah, I was just I had some SEC folks lambaste me for a few different selections I made on quarterbacks. One was that, how do you rank quarterbacks with no experience above quarterbacks with experience? And I said, well, I just pointed to Bryce Young 2 years ago and said, well, I rated him the top quarterback in the SEC just based on reputation, even though he had thrown like 5 passes the year before. And that turned out okay, number one. Number two, part of their argument was, these such and such quarterbacks aren't going to be playing in the NFL or aren't going to be high picks in the NFL. And I just pointed them to, AR-15. Well, he was not one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, but he was the first round pick in the NFL.
Yeah, talk about a guy that built off a small sample size to earn that draft status.
He only had like 3 good games last year.
That's right. That's what shocked me, is it was just, that small sample size of games, and he gets picked that high. I get, maybe that just shows you how desperate the Colts were, I guess.
Yeah, and it's all measurements for him.
That's true. Want to get to the big one of that first week, Mark. Florida State LSU in Orlando. Any vibe on that one, Mark? Early on, both teams are being hyped.
Yeah, I think that is similarly I view it as just as a competitive situation as it was last year, except for both teams are much better.
Yeah.
So they both elevated. Like last year, I looked at it as, okay, this is a brand name game, but these teams aren't that good. And they played a very entertaining game. Well, I think they're just as comparable this year, but at a higher degree. They both had a lot of tremendous players come back, especially Florida State, more of the core of its team.
Yeah.
LSU played, I forget what the numbers were in regards to the youth of their offensive line and inexperience, but they've all played through a season together now. And yeah, Harold Perkins is, I think, the best defensive player in the country.
Really? Well, okay.
So, I thought that last year. So
Both teams have their quarterbacks right back, Mark.
Yep.
I know Travis at
Oh, yeah.
Florida State and Daniels back at,
Oh, yeah.
at LSU.
Yeah, and this is probably a more important game for, I'll say, Florida State in regards to if they want to wind up in a playoff. LSU can, depending on how you look at it, LSU has to deal with a more difficult schedule, but they're going to get more benefit of the doubt coming out of the SEC.
Yeah, although the one thing about it is, though, Mark, well, yeah, what's interesting is basically Florida State's got 2 games on their schedule. It's this one and at Clemson, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then they would still have to play the ACC championship game.
Yeah, possibly against Clemson again.
Right, yeah. So they would have to maybe beat Clemson twice. Well, you see, here's the thing: if they can get this win over LSU, and then lose to Clemson at Clemson, but then get them back in the ACC title game in Jacksonville, maybe that's their path.
Yeah, they'll be fine. They have a game against Pitt that, if you're looking for landmines, that would be the one in Heinz Field in November.
Ooh, yeah, there's a little tricky one. Yeah. All right, let's get to the last game because I know you've been run along tonight, Mark, but how excited should we be about Texas at Alabama? I mean, Tyler Buckner, new quarterback at Alabama, Mullet Man Quinn Ewers back at Texas.
I'm extremely excited.
Yeah, I am too.
Extremely excited. I thought last year that Bama was going to go into Austin and blow them away.
You weren't in the minority, Mark.
Because I had never seen Texas put up a fight against anybody. And of course, if I trust in anyone's preparation and ability to rise to an occasion, it's Bama. And Texas should have won that game.
Yeah, they outplayed them, Mark.
Yeah, they outplayed them.
Yeah.
And if they would not have whiffed on a sack from a former Ohio State cornerback who I cannot recall his.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Anyway, yeah, he does something that I see done about 5 or 6 times a game that drives me nuts. And that's players coming off the edge completely out of control, and they whiff on the quarterback because they're running too fast. Anyway, would have had Bryce Young, had him dead to rights, would have ended the game, or would have given Bama like a 3rd and 1,000,000 with like 12 seconds left. In their own territory. Anyway, Bryce Young takes off for like 35 yards, sets up the game winner. Otherwise, Texas showed me a lot that day that without their starting quarterback and Hudson Card, actually his best skill set taken away from him because he was playing on a bad ankle, that they still outplayed Alabama. Actually got a bad raunchy call in the end zone that ripped them off. That should have been a safety. And they fought through all of that and outplayed Alabama, that I thought, wow, is Texas really going to take off this year? Well, they didn't.
No.
So now the return trip in Tuscaloosa. Oh, I'm all in on that game. Yes, I think Texas versus the field, if they play to their ability, is the best and biggest separation of any team over the rest of the conference.
Mark Rogers' 9th rated program, the Texas Longhorns. No, I'm with you. I think Ewers. Imagine if Ewers doesn't get hurt in that game too. What could have been. I agree with you. I thought even with a backup quarterback to outplay him, it was really Bryce Young, and then also you kind of saw the emergence of Jahmyr Gibbs in that game.
Yes.
Too. That kind of carried the day. I thought for large portions of that year, Alabama's offense was just really carried by Young and Gibbs for pretty much most of the season, and I think it's going to be interesting. And, Buckner at quarterback, I mean, what's he going to look like, after a few games under his belt, big game at home. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. What's interesting, though, with Buckner is as much as, I have my doubts about him, he may be an upgrade over, wasn't it Milroe? Was the quarterback that took over for Bryce Young last year?
Yep.
He nearly blew that Texas A&M game last year.
He was not good.
Bad. Yeah, that was bad.
we are going to see whether, people want to know whether Kyle McCord's going to be ready and whether Ohio State's going to develop. Alabama is really being put to the test because Tyler Buchner is no proven commodity. He's played the most, probably played the most capable, but not that. He threw 3 touchdowns and 5 interceptions last year. He's
Right.
not exactly lighting the world on fire. And Jalen Milroe, to your point, he was awful in that
Yeah.
Texas A&M game. And the week before, he came in for Bryce Young with a huge lead in the fourth quarter, and they almost blew the game. And he was bad in that game. So,
Listen,
yeah, I think there's a reason they went out and got a quarterback in the portal.
right. And like I said, I'm on record as saying I'm not saying this is the downturn for the Bama dynasty, but going to be a real interesting year with their quarterback situation there. And that Texas game to me looks really interesting. Yeah, I'm excited about that one. Well, I just kind of want to go over a few games with you, talk a little bit of schedule. Good stuff as always. Good show tonight, Mark. Are you doing another live stream this week?
I couldn't even register for a second there what day it was. Yeah, it's when at some point actually I'm going to be spending most of the weekend vacationing.
Okay.
For a long weekend. So
still working on that diet, Mark?
I've got a few trips lined up. Well, I knocked off a little ice cream before I jumped on tonight. There's been a lot of ice cream and cookies in my recent past.
You got to treat yourself every now and then, Mark. Indulge yourself.
My problem is it's not every now and then. I've got to go full bore on these diets. And the one thing that stretch of a discipline did for me, David,
yep,
is it didn't eliminate my sweet tooth and all of that, but it did cause me to, every time I go to the grocery store, I load up my cart with vegetables. Like I buy fresh green beans, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, all this stuff I never bought before. I just am in the habit and force myself just to eat it.
Yeah, force being the operative word, right, Mark?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
As Nick is saying here, live example of SEC bias, folks. That was back to the real MVP's call, I'm sure. Thank you so much for the contribution, Nick. We appreciate you. Gixer Squid, thank you. Who holds the most titles in college baseball? Who has the most Heisman winners, USC or Alabama? Just fun and games. Enjoy you, MVP. Sorry for the delayed super chat response there. Fight on. So USC with the most college baseball titles, of course. They've had the likes of Tom Seaver. I'm drawing a blank on other USC baseball greats. I know that there's a ton of them. But anyway, there you go. Larry, thank you so much for joining with the super chat contribution. Mark, can we talk about the Utes winning the national championship in skiing? Did this just get wrapped up in June or May? I am concerned the SEC will fall behind on the slopes. Love ya, DeReal. Yes, so again, DeReal bringing out the SEC hate or realism. I just got to say that Utah game for the Pac-12 and for Utah is a must. Florida can go out there, and if Florida turns out to be what most of us expect, which is a fringe bowl team, they really are playing with house money out there. They already won last year. They're going out to Utah, playing against the two-time defending Pac-12 champion. That's kind of house money for the SEC in that one. We've got Nick coming back with, will we get closer to a Michigan versus Ohio State natty than last year, which was a missed field goal and an overturned touchdown? And to you Michigan folks credit that think I've been piling on Michigan here recently, and I have not. There were questionable calls, and I certainly believe that was a touchdown. The rivalry deserves that stage because it is college football at its core. It would be tremendous to see those two teams play for a national championship. It would be. Yeah, we were so close, and my goodness, regardless of the outcome, what the conversation would have been like this offseason. Oh my word. Todd, thank you so much. Over under 6 years when college football coach gets $20 million per year. Well, right now, somebody jumped us past the 10 million mark. I believe I think that was Kirby Smart. I'm going to say over. I'm going to keep us at over. Hopefully some sanity kicks in. If the money that is generated by the sport dictates that these coaches are worth it, then so be it. They're worth it. When it comes to just flat out contribution to society, they're obviously not worth it, but it's supply and demand. I'm all for that. Hey, look at what I do. What I'm doing could be worth a zero, and I could have to stop a week from now if it's worth a zero. If you all deem it to be worth a zero, then I will cease to exist, or I will be talking to a wall and it'll be nothing. Or shoot, this could blow up 100 times what it is, and I could figure out all sorts of marketing gimmicks and everything else that goes with it, and I could be a millionaire on YouTube like others are a millionaire on YouTube, and I could be doing exactly the same thing. There could be absolutely no difference, but the market dictates it. So if the market dictates that, so be it. If it does not, so be it. These guys are still making plenty of cash. All right, folks. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's see. Thursday. Whoa. I should have mentioned this when David asked me, the last caller. We do a deep dive on Oregon with Tony Altamore. So we take the deep dive on all the metrics, academics, education, then, of course, the football and the athletics. The deep dive with Oregon football, 8 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday night. Only Talk Sports chiming in here late. Jeffrey getting in there late with that one. Mark is better than the most millionaires on YouTube. Well, we'd like to be able to deliver both. All right. Oregon deep dive Thursday at 8 Eastern. Hope you can join us then. Great to see all of you. We'll see you tomorrow night.